Chapter 992. Soon they arrived at the destination. There were not many traces of a great battle. The two Divine Ocean Realm cultivators had fought in the air just now, so it was impossible to leave any traces. They looked around but couldn't find Xiang Donglu. Judging from the battle just now and the short scream at the end, Xiang Donglu had probably met with an accident. Now they didn't know whether he was alive or not, and there was no trace of him. There was only one possibility. Lu Yi stood at the edge of the fog cliff and looked down. Without much hesitation he said, "I'll go down and look for him." The environment of the fog cliff was treacherous. The thick fog not only blocked the detection of divine sense, but also mixed with a large amount of magnetic or dust. The lower they went, the more their spiritual power would be suppressed. If they really went down the fog cliff, it would be difficult for the cultivators to exert their power. It would be troublesome to come up. However, it was not impossible to come up. They could always climb up. "I'll go with you," Xiaoxinghe said. Lu Yi nodded and was about to flash out when he suddenly stopped. He frowned and listened carefully. "What's that sound?" Lin Yinxiu also noticed the abnormality. After all, her cultivation was the highest among the people present. It was just that she didn't have divine sense, so her perception was not as strong as Lu Ye's, so she discovered the clue later than him. Soon the others also noticed the movement. There was a strange buzzing sound and rustling sounds coming from below the fog cliff, and it was getting closer and closer. "Something's coming up," Lu Yi shouted in a low voice. From these sounds, no matter what was coming up, there were very few of them. "Go in," Chen Yinxiu shouted and led the group forward. They only stopped when they were 1,000 feet away and looked back. The movement on the fog cliff was getting smaller and smaller, and the thick fog that shrouded the abyss also stopped rolling violently. Something the size of a human body flapped its wings and rushed out of the fog. Under the bright moonlight, a strange-shaped figure vaguely appeared in everyone's eyes. "Insect race," the Yunhe cultivator exclaimed. The thing that rushed out of the fog cliff was actually a mantis-shaped insect race. None of the cultivators of the four states were familiar with that kind of thing. After all, there were often insect swarms under the green scale battlefield, and young cultivators had seen the scene of the insect race wreaking havoc. However, the Zerg behind him was much smaller and weaker than the one Jiao Sili had seen in the jade scale battlefield. It was filled with an extremely ferocious aura. That insectoid was at least as strong as Jiao Sili. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. Jiao Sili's Zerg was naturally not enough to make everyone lose their composure, but everyone knew that Zergs always moved alone. They usually gathered in groups, forming a small army of insectoids. Since there were no insectoids, there was no insectoid nest. Thinking of the commotion they had just heard, everyone felt their hair stand on end. The thick fog continued to churn as insectoids surged out of the fog cliff. In the blink of an eye, the insectoids were everywhere. These insectoids were all different in appearance. They were not shaped like mantises spreading their wings, nor were they shaped like hyenas or seven-limbed crawlers. They also wore a layer of extremely thick bone armor, and there were no sharp barbs on their shoulders. The moonlight flickered with a cold light, and they were not like centipedes whose 100 legs danced, and were as swift as flying. The first mantis insectoid to rush out of the fog had not discovered the Chun clan and the others, and it flapped its wings and flew towards us. A small number of insectoids of different appearances followed closely behind. The Yunhe cultivator's flying sword slashed out, and directly cut the insectoid in half. As the sword light wreaked havoc, even fewer insectoids fell halfway. Feng Yuechan's technique was break, and she cooperated with Jiao Sili to kill the enemy. Even Yi, who had been hiding in Hu Po's body all this time, came out in a flash, and activated the power of her technique. However, even though the two people and one spirit's techniques were ordinary, they were still unable to deal with the small number of insectoids that swarmed over. In a short while, the insectoids had charged close to us. The giant armor blocked our backs. The Chun clan, Xiaoxinghe, and the Divine Ocean cultivators stood on the left and right. Sword light flashed, and insectoids fell one after another. The Chun clan's expression was solemn. When I was in the Jade Scale battlefield, I had experienced an insectoid tide, but the insectoids I encountered this time were much easier to deal with than the ones behind us. After all, they were things outside the Jiaoxi battlefield, and the strength they could unleash might be too weak. However, these insectoids were all comparable to Lin Yinxiu. If they were few in number, it would be troublesome to deal with them, but if they were few in number, it would be a disaster. The Chun clan really did not understand why there were so few insectoids on the fog cliff. Why were the insectoids not discovered in the future? The insectoids were highly intelligent, and they might have been hiding on the fog cliff all this time. The Chun clan recalled their mission. It was Nightingale who reported that there were no ferocious beasts here. Before we came, we had also killed a harmful spirit python, so we thought that the spirit python was the ferocious beast that Nightingale had discovered. However, they thought that it was. They thought that what Nightingale had discovered was not the spirit python, but the signs of the insectoids surging in the fog cliff. They did not have the time to think too much. The 8 people and 1 spirit fought fiercely with the insectoids for a while, and the Chun clan shouted, "Let's go." If we continued to stay, we would probably be surrounded by the insectoids. In that short period of time, although the number of insectoids that died in the hands of the Chun clan was few, there was still a small army of insectoids in our field of vision. The Chun clan vaguely sensed that the insectoids that rushed out of the fog cliff did not have Lin Yinxiu, and there were no true lake realm cultivators. They sensed that there were no insectoids comparable to Li Baxian, but it was fine. I gave the order, and everyone immediately rushed into the sky, killing a bloody path through the encirclement of the young insectoids, and slowly escaped in a direction. The young insectoids in front of us chased closely, but they were all killed by Jiao Sili's flying sword. Divine Ocean Realm cultivators, send a message to the Law Division. Tell the head that there is no insectoid tied here. Also, the head of the Law Division, Xiang Donglu, has been killed by a male cultivator with an identity. We know if he is alive or dead. Yes. The Divine Ocean Realm cultivators accepted the order and hurriedly responded. Senior Sister Feng, send a message to Pill Heart Sect, and ask us to send people to eliminate the insectoids. In the area thousands of miles away, Pill Heart Sect was not the weakest sect. Now that the insectoid tide suddenly broke out, the sects and families had no way to deal with it. Even an 8th-rank clan like Jiao Si's was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot in front of such an insectoid tide. Even if Team D4 did not eliminate Spirit Stream today, it would be difficult for them to survive. Pill Heart Sect was the only sect we could not rely on. If we could not send people over in time, we might not have a chance to stop the insectoid tide from spreading. Feng Yuechan hurriedly sent the message. While speaking, the Chun clan descended to somewhere above. Outside that area was the backyard of Spirit Stream. Later, when Chun Lai led Jiao Si and the others to retreat from Spirit Stream, they passed by that area. According to Chun Lai, that area was where the people of Spirit Stream who did not have the talent to cultivate lived. There were a lot of people, about 2,000 to 8,000 of them. Anyone in Spirit Stream who did not have the ability to cultivate was basically dead. Only the mortals who had never cultivated were left. Now that the insectoid tide suddenly broke out, if those mortals were to pay attention to it, they would definitely have a chance to survive. Although the Chun clan had just fought a small battle with Spirit Stream and almost wiped out their entire clan, it was Jiao Si who started it first. And now, I know why Spirit Stream did this. But to those mortals, the Chun clan had a way to reason with them. Flying to the backyard, the Chun clan shouted in a low voice, "The insectoid tide has broken out. If you want to live, quickly find a place to hide. The deeper you hide, the better." Slowly, slowly. Back in the rear courtyard of the Spirit Stream sect, there were many mortals who had never cultivated. Tonight, none of them were able to sleep well because there had been no more fighting in the main family. We all knew what had happened, and many of them were roused from their slumber. They gathered together to discuss the situation, hoping to find someone to go to the main family and check on the situation. Before they could come to a conclusion, the Chun clan's voice rang out from below. Although these mortals had never cultivated, they were still from Spirit Stream, and knew a thing or two about the cultivation world. Naturally, they had heard about the insectoid tide. The Chun clan's voice was calm, and the Spirit Stream cultivators who had gathered together immediately panicked. Thankfully, there weren't any old men in charge, and they quickly scattered to find a place to hide. The Chun clan turned around and saw a dark cloud rising from the foggy cliff under the moonlight. The dark cloud was densely packed with the figures of the insectoid tribe. There were so many of them that they could not be counted. I didn't linger. Before the spirit stream cultivators could react, I turned and flew away, pulling out some explosive flame spirit stones from my bag of holding. Rumbling sounds were heard, accompanied by violent vibrations of the leaves. A small number of insectoids were attracted, and they chased after me. The insectoids were highly intelligent, but they were extremely sensitive to the vibrations of the leaves. The Chun clan had noticed this back in the Jadescale battlefield. Jiao Si didn't dare to let the insectoids linger in the backyard of Spirit Stream, so he had to use that method to attract their attention and lure them away. As for whether or not there would be any side effects, Ling Shi and the other mortals would be the ones who would be able to survive at the very beginning. I would do my best and leave the rest to fate. Captain Minister, I want you to protect yourselves first, the Divine Sea Cultivator suddenly said. Of course Jiao Si knew he had to protect himself. However, given the current situation, I had to attract the insectoid's attention first. What is the Pill Heart Sect's response? The Chun clan asked. Feng Yuechan hurriedly replied. The Pill Heart Sect hasn't sent anyone yet. Good. Chun Jia roared and continued to throw out exploding fire spirit rocks. The sound of explosions was accompanied by dense Luyi fluctuations. The zergs in front of him were like a tidal wave that chased after him. The Chun clan could sense the weak auras of the young masters in the swarm, and knew that these insectoids were comparable to Jiao Sili. Gather and spread out. The Chun clan grabbed Hu Pa from his shoulder and threw it to the giant beetle. Then he turned and flew in another direction. A pair of fiery red wings spread out on his back, and his speed increased sharply. The Chun clan! He exclaimed. Let's go! Xiao Xinghe shouted, and took the lead in another direction. The rumbling sounds gradually faded away. A moment later, everyone turned around and saw that there were only a few insectoids chasing after us. However, Jiao Si's insectoids were endless. Their hearts couldn't help but rise to their throats. Chapter 993. While flying, Luyi searched carefully. Such a large-scale insect tide could not be led to a place with many people, especially a city. Otherwise, there would be countless deaths and injuries. There were many mortals living in those cities. Soon Luyi chose a plane as his target. It had a wide field of vision and there was no one around. It was a good place to encircle the insect tribe. He quickly sent a message to Feng Yuechan, asking her to pass on the message to Pill Heart Sect. At this moment, a gap opened in Pill Heart Sect's protective formation. Many cultivators turned into streams of light and flew out of the mountain gate. From afar, the streams of light were like stars chasing after the moon. It was a spectacular scene. Pill Heart Sect was a second-grade sect. It had a strong foundation and many disciples. After receiving Feng Yuechan's report and learning that there was an insect tide in their territory, they quickly took action. They also ordered the subordinate sects and families under their jurisdiction to cooperate. At the same time, the news of an insect tide on Mtimi spread rapidly through various channels. At first, some people could not believe it. After all, it was too sudden. No one knew if it was true or not. However, as time passed and confirmed through various channels, the cultivators who were still doubtful finally confirmed that there was indeed an insect tide. In an instant, many cultivators within 1,000 miles took action. At the back mountain of Pill Heart Sect, a figure stood quietly. If any Pill Heart Sect disciple was there, he would recognize that it was their deputy sect master, Yu Jejia. Pill Heart Sect was a second-grade sect. Being able to become the deputy sect master, Yu Guanzha's cultivation was naturally not weak. However, what was strange was that he looked uneasy at the moment. By the looks of it, he was obviously waiting for someone. Someone who could make an expert like him wait uneasily was definitely not an ordinary person. The mountain wind whistled. Yu Guanzha's eyes were filled with reminiscence. Suddenly he sighed. Others might not know why there was an insect tide at the foot of Mtimi, but he knew immediately when he received the news. Something had begun. The appearance of the insect tide was just to attract the attention of the Elixir Heart Sect. At the moment, the Elixir Heart Sect only had the sect master and 3 other patriarchs who were in closed-door training all year round. All the other warriors in the Spirit Sea realm had left to eliminate the insect tide. It could be said that Pill Heart Sect's defense was at its weakest. It was earlier than he had expected. Therefore, after arranging some trivial matters, He immediately came here and waited silently. Suddenly, a ripple appeared in front of Yu Guanjia, and as the ripple spread, a figure appeared in front of him like a ghost. Even though Yu Guanjia had been prepared for this, he was still slightly surprised. He sighed inwardly that this person's strength had grown even stronger. Before he had appeared, even he had not sensed it. The person's appearance could not be seen clearly because he was wearing a mask on his face. The mask was black and white, with each color occupying half of the face. However, where the black and white intersected, it gave people a feeling of harmony. It was indescribably strange. High Lord. Yu Guanjia's heart trembled, and he respectfully bowed. If others saw this scene, they would be shocked. Yu Guanjia was the deputy sect leader of a second-grade sect. When the sect leader was in closed-door training all year round, he could almost be said to be in charge of the entire Pill Heart sect. His position was high and powerful. In the entire military province, only the sect leaders of the first-grade sects had a higher status than him. However, at that very moment he was bowing respectfully to another person. Furthermore, his attitude was extremely respectful, and he was even addressing that person as exalted. Long time no see. Your cultivation has improved again, the High Lord said lightly. Thank you for your concern, High Lord. The High Lord raised his head and looked in a certain direction. Is that person still in closed-door training? He was asking about the sect leader of Pill Heart sect. Yu Guanjia replied, it's been 8 years. He hasn't come out yet. The High Lord sneered. He wants to break the shackles of the Divine Sea realm on his own? The old man is senile. The time isn't right. How can the shackles of the Divine Sea realm be so easy to break? Yu Guanjia's expression changed. At their level of cultivation, what they were most concerned about was naturally the shackles of the Divine Sea realm. Every Divine Sea realm cultivator could feel that there was a path after the Divine Sea realm. However, so far no one had found where that path was. Many people had been in closed-door training like that person, but they had gained nothing. Yu Guanjia had also tried to comprehend it, but he had also gained nothing. However, judging from the High Lord's words, he seemed to know something but did not dare to ask. The High Lord saw through his thoughts, so he said casually, don't think too much. You'll understand when the time is right. Yes. Is she still here? The High Lord asked again. As per the High Lord's order, I didn't let her do anything today. Because of this, she threw a tantrum. However, as the vice sect leader, I forced her to give the order. The High Lord chuckled. Her daughter is right outside. Of course she cares. Feng Yuechan. Yu Guanjia's heart skipped a beat. He felt that the High Lord was indeed powerful. Nothing could be hidden from him. I'm going to see her. It's time to take back some things. The High Lord said and walked in a direction. Yu Guanjia hurriedly cupped his fists. Please don't hurt her, High Lord. The High Lord did not stop walking. Only a faint chuckle could be heard. You're really devoted. It's been so many years. Her daughter is already a true Lake Realm cultivator. You still can't let go. Yu Guanjia's expression was bitter. He did not say anything. Some things were not so easy to let go. Don't worry. I'm just here to take something. I won't hurt her. Hearing the High Lord's words, Yu Guanjia heaved a sigh of relief. The High Lord walked at a steady pace. At this time, 70% of the Pill Heart sect's manpower had been deployed. The originally lively sect had also quieted down. Along the way, no one noticed him. After walking for more than 2 hours, he finally reached the peak of a spiritual mountain. Looking at the familiar scenery, the High Lord's face revealed a look of reminiscence. Many years ago, he used to frequent this place. However, at that time he did not come alone. Instead, he came with another person. At that time, he was the most trusted subordinate of that person whose name resounded throughout the land of the 9 prefectures. Decades passed in the blink of an eye. Things changed with the passage of time. He did not expect to come here again in such a manner. It made him sigh. There was a small courtyard at the top of Spirit Peak. It was quiet and elegant. Outside the courtyard was a courtyard surrounded by a fence. Small purple flowers climbed on top of the fence, draping a layer of purple over the fence. He immediately saw the figure of a woman sitting in the courtyard with a solemn expression. Looking at her current appearance, she seemed to be sending a message to someone. She must be sending a message to that girl, Yuechan. He didn't hide his figure and just walked straight ahead. The woman in the courtyard immediately looked up with a vigilant expression. The sudden appearance of such a person in the sect naturally alerted her. However, her expression soon turned to one of surprise and suspicion. She scrutinized the person from head to toe. Although the person was wearing a mask and his appearance could not be seen clearly, she recognized his figure at a glance. Astonishment filled her eyes, which then turned into disbelief. The High Lord walked into the courtyard and looked at her quietly. His face was covered and his expression could not be seen clearly. However, there seemed to be a smile in his eyes. Great Mountain. The woman's voice trembled. The High Lord raised his hand and took off his mask, revealing an ordinary face. He smiled at the woman and said, "Senior Sister Chiu, long time no see. In the entire Elixir Heart sect, there weren't many women with the surname Chiu. And the only one who could live here and was at the Divine Sea Realm was Elder Chiu Min. Very few cultivators of this generation had heard of her name. This was because she had been living in seclusion for the past few decades. She had never left Pilheart sect. Even within Pilheart sect, her presence was extremely weak. Some disciples did not even know that their sect had such an elder. However, the older generation of cultivators were very familiar with her name. It was not that she had done anything shocking. The main thing was that she had once married an incredible man, and had even given birth to a daughter for him. That man's name was Feng Wujiang. Chiu Min was Feng Wujiang's widow and Feng Yuechan's birth mother. After dozens of years, Chiu Min could not believe her eyes when she suddenly saw Tai Shan again. She stared blankly at the familiar face in front of her. Dozens of years had passed, but his appearance did not seem to have changed at all. Only his temperament had changed a little. He had become more reserved and more mysterious. She still remembered that Great Mountain was the most active of Feng Wujiang's brothers. He was also the one who worshipped Feng Wujiang the most. After a while she said, "But aren't you already dead?" Great Mountain smiled. "Senior sister, you have never seen my corpse. How can you be sure that I'm dead? Your imprint has clearly dissipated." Chiu Min frowned. It was very simple to determine whether a person was dead or alive. If the imprint was still there, the person was alive. If the imprint was gone, the person was dead. Chiu Min naturally had Great Mountain's imprint. After all, they were very familiar with each other several decades ago. However, the imprint had already dissipated after the battle several decades ago. That was why she was certain that Great Mountain was dead. However, at this very moment, Great Mountain, who should have been dead for several decades, actually appeared in front of her alive. This gave her a huge psychological impact. In a flash, Chiu Min came to a realization. You erased your own battlefield imprint. Other than death, there was only one possibility for the imprint to disappear. The battlefield imprint had been erased. This kind of thing was very difficult to do. Even if a cultivator made some mistake and was expelled from the sect, they would only lose their identity as a disciple of the sect. The battlefield imprint would still remain. After all, it was a gift from the heavens. However, just because it was difficult to do, it did not mean that it was impossible. Especially when Great Mountain had followed Feng Wujiang for many years. Feng Wujiang had shown them many miraculous methods that were rarely seen by ordinary people. Senior sister is still so smart. Great Mountain smiled, admitting it. Senior sister, aren't you going to invite me to sit? Only then did Chiu Min come back to her senses. She hurriedly invited him. This place is still the same. It hasn't changed from before. Great Mountain turned to look around. As he spoke, he met Chiu Min's anxious gaze. Knowing what she was thinking, he slowly shook his head. Big brother Wujiang has indeed died in battle. I buried his body with my own hands. The hope in Chiu Min's eyes instantly disappeared. Chapter 994. On Spirit Peak in the small courtyard, the light in Chiu Min's eyes dimmed again. Originally, when she saw Tai Shan come back from the dead, she still had some hope in her heart. She thought that Feng Wujiang was like Tai Shan, erasing his battlefield imprint and hiding somewhere all these years. But hope was just hope. Thinking about it, if he was really still alive, it was impossible for him to not show up for so many years, and it was even more impossible for him to not see her daughter. Feng Wujiang, after all, was dead long ago. All these years, where have you been? Qiumin calmed herself down and asked. Walking around, I don't have a fixed residence, Tai Shan replied with a smile. Why did you fake your death? Were you hiding from someone? That's not it. Senior Sister Qiu, you don't have to think too much. It's just that there are some things that I didn't know back then. Only by jumping out can I see more clearly. Qiumin frowned slightly. Tai Shan's words were unclear, and she didn't really understand. She increasingly felt that the Tai Shan in front of her was very different from the one in her memories. Then you see clearly now? Tai Shan shook his head slowly. It's complicated and confusing, but I won't be as clueless as before. That's good. Qiumin took the lead. The two chatted for a while more. Tai Shan said, Senior Sister Qiu, actually, I came this time to find you for something. Qiumin looked at Tai Shan and smiled. Just say it. We've been friends for so many years, why are you treating me like an outsider? Tai Shan stared into Tai Shan's eyes with a serious expression. You need something that little brother Yujiang left outside his place. Wu Ning looked at him, and a look of confusion flashed across his eyes. What is it? Their eyes met for a moment, and Lu Yi suddenly laughed. Young man, you're right. Senior Sister's temperament has changed. Tai Shan became more and more worried. What is he talking about? Lu Yi shook her head. Senior Sister, since you're here, you can naturally be sure that it's outside his place. Why do you have to deceive you? Tai Shan frowned and said, but little brother Yujiang did leave something outside your place. Sigh. Lu Yi suddenly sighed. You know, I will give it to you. But you really know what he's talking about. Wu Ning had a helpless expression on his face. Senior Sister, why don't you take a look at this? Lu Yi suddenly changed the topic, took out an item, and handed it to Wu Ning. It was a moon reflection plate. When Tai Shan saw it, his face sank slightly. He vaguely realized something, and even his aura became slightly hotter. You raised your hand to take the moon reflection plate and poured your spirit power into it. In an instant, a scene of looking down from a low altitude appeared under the moon reflection plate. The moon reflection disc was a set of two. It couldn't be used to transmit images. One side of the moon reflection disc was used to reflect images, while the other side couldn't be used to see the scene here. Judging from the reflection of the moon reflection plate in his hand, it was clear that no one was holding the moon reflection plate in the air. The scene above the reflection was transmitted to the other side. The crafting of the moon reflection plate was not simple. Initially, when Wu Ning was returning to the Blue Blood Sect's encampment from the spiritual stream battlefield, she passed by the 100-Peak Mountain to participate in the Dragon Spring meeting. The Green Feather Mountain, Supreme Luo Sect, and the 8 houses of the Qing clan had worked together to create a giant moon reflection plate to reflect the battle situation at the 100-Peak Mountain. Because this moon reflection plate was made with a smooth surface, it could not see the specific scene. It could only see the small distribution of the 8 powerhouses. Naturally, the moon reflection plate in Tai Shan's hand was of a much lower quality than the one at the 100-Peak Mountain. A scene was reflected in the moon reflection plate. It was a vast plain, and in the reflection, insects of all shapes and sizes were wreaking havoc everywhere. There were also figures of cultivators crisscrossing back and forth, killing the insects. Of course, Wu Ning knew that the young martial artists of the Pill Heart sect had rushed out to help when the insect tide suddenly broke out in Mushin. You had also contacted Feng Yuechan for a while, and knew that you were fighting the enemy and killing insects on a plain with a few friends. Therefore, when Tai Shan saw the scene reflected in the moon reflection plate, he knew where it was. At that moment, the scene in the moon reflection plate turned and projected to a certain location on the plain. At that location, 8 figures appeared in the field of vision. They looked very lifeless. It was clear that they were a group of old people. Among the 8 people, 7 were women and 2 were men. The one standing at the back was very small. Even though it was just a reflection in the moon reflection plate, it gave people a feeling that it was an iron wall. It was as long as I stood outside, no one could break through my defense. Wu Ning's gaze fixed on the man standing in front of the small figure. He was using a technique to kill the enemy. That person is your man Feng Yuechan. Tai Shan's aura suddenly became bone-chilling. She plucked a large purple flower and sniffed it. You remember that those flowers were personally transplanted by little brother Yujiang because I heard that he hated that kind of flower. Senior sister has taken good care of him. I turned around and smiled. Of course, senior sister will take even better care of this martial nephew of yours. Wu Ning clenched the moon reflection plate in his hand and calmed his mind. He said, that insect tide has nothing to do with him? Are you a fool? If you could cultivate to the divine sea realm and live for dozens of years, how could you still be the same man who cherished knowledge? Today's events were too coincidental. When the insect tide suddenly broke out in Mushan, a small number of people from the Pill Heart sect left the sect to deal with the insect tide. At that time, Lu Yi, who should have died dozens of years ago, came to the sect. You shouldn't think too much. What do you think, senior sister? Lu Yi answered with a question. It doesn't have anything to do with him. Tai Shan's heart sank. That was an unimaginable method. At least, as far as he knew, it wasn't humanly possible to trigger the insect tide. First of all, where would they get so few insectoids from? Wu Ningyan is one of his people. Shang Taishan didn't ask but used an if tone. Today, when you received Feng Yuechan's message, you wanted to go there in person. However, Feng Wujiang forced you to come. You were just wondering why Feng Wujiang did that. Now you know that Lu Yi wanted to see you. So you must stay in the Pill Heart sect. On Wu Ning's way, the sect didn't give any warning or activate any restrictions. I was able to reach the outside before I entered the human realm. Obviously, it didn't explain much. Senior Martial Sister Chiu, you only came here for this item? Lu Yi sighed again. I hope you can fulfill my wish, Senior Martial Sister. You know what he's talking about. Taishan pursed his red lips. A scene decades later appeared in his mind. Yu Guanjia had once handed something to you for safekeeping and told you that if no one came to you for that thing one day, you could hand it over no matter what, especially Wu Ning. Back then, Taishan knew why Yu Guanjia did not warn him repeatedly. After all, at that time, Wu Ning could not be considered the person Yu Guanjia relied on the most. Their brotherly relationship was deep, so Yu Guanjia had reason to not be on guard against Lu Yi. However, I warned him repeatedly. Moreover, it hadn't been several decades. Lu Yi had died several decades ago. You almost forgot about it. It wasn't until today that you saw Lu Yi, and I said I wanted to take away the thing Yu Guanjia left outside that Taishan suddenly became vigilant. What exactly is this thing? Wu Ningyuan didn't warn you like that back then. Several decades later, Lu Yi really came to you for it. This thing has been in your possession for several decades. Naturally, you've played with it and comprehended it. However, this heart is a strange disc. You have no way of comprehending anything useless from it. Senior sister, you don't have much time, but he also has too little time. If you can get this thing in one incense stick, I'm afraid your martial nephew will have a bad time. He threatened you. Taishan glared at Wu Ning. He forgot that you're his little brother Youjiang's only flesh and blood. Of course you know. Lu Yi took the lead. So if it's not possible, you're absolutely willing to hurt you. However, for little brother Youjiang's unfinished business, any price is worth it. Wu Ningyuan's heart is dead. He said it to you personally. Yes, little brother Youjiang isn't dead yet. But the one who should die is me. The one who should die is that bastard world. Wu Ning's mood suddenly became less agitated. What does he want? Wu Ning slowly shook his head. You just want this thing. Take it and leave. Your subordinates don't have what he wants. You know where he heard the news from, but if he's mistaken. Lu Yi smiled slightly. Senior sister, you should think about it quickly. Taishan suddenly had a headache. Wu Ning had become too little. In the future, I was the most honest and the least scheming one in Yu Guanjia's hands. But when we met again decades ago, Wu Ning found that his heart completely recognized me. Perhaps he didn't know me in the first place. The only one who knew my true nature was Yu Guanjia. Otherwise, Wu Ningyuan would not have specially told you these words back then. Time passed quickly. Wu Ning stared at the reflection in the moon reflecting plate and muttered to herself. Lu Yi also urged her. She just sat at the side and waited silently. Under the moon reflecting plate's reflection on the plains, Qiu Min and the others worked together to kill the enemy. Later, I was alone and used the exploding fire spirit rock to create a small commotion, leading a small number of Zergs to the plains. Then I immediately found a place to hide. When the Zergs lost sight of me, they became like headless flies. They acted against their instincts and devoured everything that had no vitality. In a short period of time, wherever the Zergs passed by, the plains that were originally full of vitality became dead silent. Fortunately, after a while, a small number of cultivators who heard the news rushed over from all directions. Among them, the Pill Heart sect had the fewest people. Even a small number of cultivators in the Divine Ocean realm came. The others in the group had already contacted Chiu Min. When they met up, they joined the small army to exterminate the Zergs. In the midst of the fierce battle, Wu Ning suddenly frowned. She moved to the front of Giant Beetle and quietly spread out her divine telekinesis to investigate in all directions. What's wrong? Nearby, Li Baxian, who was controlling his sword to kill the Zergs, asked. Nothing. Chiu Min shook her head. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she didn't feel like she was being watched. Chapter 995. Although the outbreak of the insect tide was sudden and the scale was huge, cultivators from all directions rushed over and quickly stabilized the situation. However, no one knew how many people would be affected this time. Most of the insects were lured to the plains by Lu Yi, but many of them were scattered. These scattered insects would definitely cause some impact to the villages and cities within 1,000 miles. As time passed, the number of insectoids decreased. The entire plain was filled with cultivators slaughtering the insectoids. The dead land was filled with insectoid corpses. Cultivators who received the news kept rushing over. Lu Ye's team was well organized. There were people from various sects, so their efficiency in killing the insects was not bad. Moreover, killing these insects actually gave them battle merits, which was a pleasant surprise. While the fierce battle was still going on, Lu Yi suddenly felt a sense of danger. When he looked up, he saw a figure rushing down from the sky. It was heading straight for them. A terrifying aura filled the air, and a huge pressure descended from the sky. It was a Divine Ocean realm cultivator. Lu Yi almost thought that this person was going to attack them. Fortunately, this unfamiliar Divine Ocean realm cultivator dodged when he was only 300 feet away from them. He landed on the side and punched out, shattering the head of an insect wrapped in bones that looked like a hyena. This insect was not weak. It was comparable to a true lake realm cultivator. Moreover, the bones on the surface of its body gave it a strong defense, so it took some effort to kill it. Lu Yi and the others had killed many insects of this type before, so they naturally had a deep understanding of this. Seeing this Divine Ocean realm cultivator rushing down from the sky single-handedly kill the surging insect tide, Dai Qi heaved a sigh of relief. At that moment, I really thought that the familiar Dai Qin would attack us. He frowned slightly, abandoned the distracting thoughts in his mind, and continued to cooperate with Xiao Xinghe and the others to kill the enemy. While this Divine Ocean realm cultivator was rushing down from the sky, in the courtyard of Pill Heart Sect's Spirit Peak, the Chan clan cultivator, who had been staring at the reflection plate and muttering to himself, sensed the rapid changes in the scene. He looked up and shouted, Tai Shan. Tai Shan sat still and smiled in response. Time's up, Senior Chiu. Give it to him, Mustang Chan. Dai Qi said as he raised his hand and threw out an item. Tai Shan raised his hand and caught it. At that moment, the scene in the moon reflection plate changed again. The person holding the moon reflection plate suddenly changed direction. Feng Yuechan and the others appeared in the moon reflection plate. Chan Jia frowned and angrily said, "He tricked you." There were traces of contact with someone, not to mention the battlefield imprint. There was no way to contact anyone, but there was no moon reflecting disk here, and the head changed direction. In other words, Tai Shan had arranged it long ago. He was afraid that if he didn't hand over the item, Feng Yuechan wouldn't be safe either. Who knows? Tai Shan was obviously very satisfied after getting what he wanted. Personally speaking, you are absolutely not willing to hurt little brother Youjiang's flesh and blood. However, if no one blocks your path, you also know what you will do. Please forgive me, Senior Sister Chiu. His tone was somewhat polite, but the threat was obvious. As I said that, I put away the palm-sized disc. What does he want to do? What is this disc? After a few days, Senior Sister Chiu will naturally know what you want to do. That disc is a very important part. You can only say so much. Senior Sister, please wait and see. Dai Qi didn't feel at ease. He only felt that nothing small would happen in the next few days. Oh right. Taishan thought of something. Senior sister, please make a heavenly secret oath that you won't reveal anything today to the 8th person. Chunjia looked at me passionately. What if you do? Today's matter was too serious. Other than that, their vice-sect leader actually didn't have anything to do with Taishan. How scary was that? Senior sister, why are you so stubborn? Taishan looked at her. Even if he calls Yuechan back to stay by his side, he might not be able to protect you. Senior sister will want to know what you are capable of. Chunjia turned her head and said coldly, don't worry. You will definitely reveal what happened today. Senior sister, please make a heavenly secret oath. Taishan looked at her with a burning gaze. Chunjia lowered her eyes. In the end, she made a heavenly secret oath in front of Taishan. You were willing to gamble with Feng Yuechan's safety. Even if Feng Yujiang told you to give the disc to Taishan, you still gave it to him. After all, Feng Yuechan is your and Feng Yujiang's only child. She is also your only hope in this world. When she opened her eyes again, there was no trace of Taishan behind her. She only heard a voice coming from somewhere. Thank you, Shiji, for your help. When the day comes, Shiji will understand your painstaking effort. Taishan left. Chunjia sat under the chair and didn't move for a long time. What happened today didn't shock even a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator like you. There wasn't much for you to understand. When there were no more footsteps, Chunjia came back to her senses. She looked up and saw Yu Guanjia walking over. Get lost. Chunjia looked at me passionately. Yu Guanjia's mouth moved as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He cupped his fists and turned to leave. After a few days of fierce fighting, the number of insects on the plain had decreased. The young cultivators gathered and spread out in all directions, looking for fish that had escaped the net. Xiaomin's team was also doing the same thing, but they didn't find anything. There was no news, but the insect nest was found. It was in the deepest part of the misty cliff. No young cultivators at the Spirit Sea Realm came here, ready to enter the misty cliff and destroy the insect nest. However, in a place like the misty cliff, even Spirit Sea Realm cultivators wouldn't have much of an advantage if they went in. Therefore, without knowing the situation inside the misty cliff, the Spirit Sea Realm cultivators didn't dare to act rashly. Daichi led a group of people to Lu Ye's backyard. The reason I came over was to take a look at the situation of the people in Daichi's backyard. When the insect tide broke out, Daichi was the first to bear the brunt of it. The young mortals all hid under my warning, and I knew that many people had escaped. Looking around, the buildings that were originally disorderly were now in a mess. It should have been affected when the insect tide passed by. The ground was full of small patches of blood, and there were also a few blood-stained clothes. Obviously, it was fortunate that not many people were killed. There were still some scattered insects. There weren't many of them and they were too weak. The team of 8 people gathered in groups of 2 to cut off the fish that had escaped the net and search for survivors. After a round of investigation, the result was both good and bad. Many people in Lu Ye's group died, but some of them didn't escape. Those people were slow to react. Before Daichi finished shouting, they had already found a place to hide. They were lucky to survive. Xiaomin's mood wasn't light at all. When I killed Lu Yi and the other cultivators, I didn't go easy on them. I didn't hold back at all. After all, they were enemies. It was he who died and not you who died. There wasn't the slightest bit of mercy to speak of. But what Daichi's cultivators did was ultimately related to those mortals. After a calamity, there were 700 people in Lu Ye's group who were still alive. It was possible to restore the family's glory. Before this, the best ending was not to live a peaceful life. The battlefield imprint didn't send any messages. Daichi looked up to check. After a while I looked up and said, "Let's go. Minister, this one wants you to return to Grand Sky City and report the details of this incident." That time we were only here to complete a mission. In the end, so many things happened that we were caught off guard. The insect swarm was related to us, but the extermination of Lu Ye's family was caused by Team D4. An 8th rank family was destroyed just like that. Whether it was a small matter or a big one, even if Lu Ye's side was the first to act, they still had to give their subordinates an explanation. Xiaomin also wanted to know why Lu Yi did this. With my own strength, I couldn't find any useless clues. I could only rely on the Law Division. Perhaps the Law Division would know something. As for the Misty Cliff insect nest, it was related to us. Naturally, there was no Divine Sea Realm cultivator to deal with it. Saying that, just as she was about to take out a large group of spirit boats, Xiaomin suddenly turned her head to look to the side. In an instant, her hair stood on end. This was because in this direction, under a broken roof, there was an enchanting figure that had disappeared without anyone noticing. No one knew when you came. You seemed to have been standing outside, quietly watching everyone. The man's figure was extremely enchanting, and his clothes were also extremely revealing, causing one's blood to boil. Just by standing outside, his entire body was emitting an extremely seductive aura, causing one to shift their gaze away. Below his face was a mask, allowing one to see his face clearly. But Xiaomin still recognized that man as the one who flew over our heads the night after Houyi. Xiangdong was also killed by this man. What made Daiqi even more surprised was that I had seen the mask this man was wearing before. It was this kind of pure white mask with no red or blue ribbons on the right and left cheeks. I had interacted with people wearing that kind of mask twice. The first time was in the Cloud River battlefield. When I was being chased, no one was wearing that kind of mask. A man suspected to be in True Lake Realm helped me. A few months later, on my way back to Grand Sky City from Ash Flame Mountain Pass to be promoted, I met a woman wearing that kind of mask. I fought with her and beat her away. That was the 8th time. Although we didn't have much contact, it was impossible to say that those people were in the same group. They belonged to an extremely mysterious organization, so they had no idea why they came to contact me. Xiaomin was very willing to have anything to do with that kind of person. I often wore that kind of mask myself, so I naturally knew the character of that kind of person. Those who hid their head and showed their tail were never good people. The moment the sun and the sun met, Xiaomin's heart skipped a beat, feeling her core. She shouted, "Jog." When she said this, she sprinted over. I was wondering why this man suddenly appeared outside. For you to appear here at that time, it was obvious that you came with good intentions. Chapter 996. Perhaps to silence him? After all, after this woman killed Xiangdong the night before, when she flew over the Chan family, Lu Ye's eyes had met hers for a moment. In the midst of the attack, Lu Ye was about to summon the dragon throne when a fragrant wind blew over. Then the woman appeared in front of him like a ghost. She gently raised her palm and pressed it toward him. At this moment, Lu Ye's hair stood on end. Before he could see what happened, the slender palm pressed against his chest. Lu Ye's body suddenly froze. He felt his spiritual power dissipate, and he couldn't muster any strength at all. The difference was too great. This woman was definitely not an ordinary Divine Sea Realm cultivator. She was even stronger than Lu Yuemei, whom Lu Yi had met that day. Xiangdong was also in the Divine Sea Realm, but he couldn't even last 30 breaths under this woman's attack. How could her strength be weak? Hu Pa, who was crouching on Lu Ye's shoulder, roared. His demonic essence surged as he revealed his true form. He opened his bloody mouth and bit toward the woman. However, the woman just chuckled. "Go away." Her voice was soft, causing ripples in people's hearts. With a wave of her hand, Hu Pa flew out. Giant Armor and Xiao Xinghe flew out together with him. The two of them reacted extremely quickly. They reacted the moment Lu Yi shouted, but they didn't run. Instead, they rushed over with Lu Yi. Now they were unlucky together. With a clang, flying swords covered the sky and covered the earth. Flying swords were naturally Li Baxian's means. After the flying swords, Feng Yuechan didn't cast any spells. The two of them had been cultivating together since a long time ago, and their hearts were no longer as one. In terms of coordination, even cultivators who were several levels stronger than them would have to deal with it. However, the difference in their cultivation was too small. Facing the flying swords and spells, the man didn't even look at them. He just blew out a heavy breath from his mouth. This breath turned into a pink mist. The flying swords and spells were knocked back into the pink mist, and their power instantly dissipated. Fog pervaded the air, enveloping the area where everyone was, causing everyone to feel dizzy and disoriented. Lai Yejie didn't know when he had reached this man's side, or if he was waiting for him to launch a surprise attack, but he was already enveloped by the pink mist. His figure staggered and revealed himself. A hasty stab didn't pose any threat at all. A bunch of boring big guys. The man's firm voice sounded again. He grabbed Ling Qi's arm and flew into the sky. He left in a flash. Giant armor and the warriors at the Divine Sea Realm stood up awkwardly, but they were also affected by the pink mist and felt dizzy. After a while, Xiao Xinghe exclaimed, "Yes, the captain has been taken away. Your cultivation is the lowest, so your recovery is also the slowest. Although you are affected by the pink mist, this man clearly doesn't have the intention to kill us. He's just giving us a temporary way to move. Wait. Send the message." The Divine Sea Realm warrior gritted his teeth and shouted. Lai Yejia seemed to have woken up from a dream and hurriedly sent out a message. A moment ago, the pink mist dispersed, and everyone sat down to adjust their breathing. They quickly recovered, and when they recalled the scene from before, they were all shocked. "Who is this person?" Li Baxin asked. "Why did you capture eldest junior brother?" The Divine Sea Realm warrior shook his head. "I know." After a pause, he said, "For the time being, eldest junior brother's life isn't in danger. If this man really wanted to kill someone, one of them could escape." The difference in strength was obvious. However, he didn't kill anyone in the group, but just captured Ling Qi and left. He obviously didn't have any ulterior motives. But Lai Yejia was captured. Even if his life wasn't in danger, the situation was still optimistic. Who knew what this man was going to do to Ling Qi? At the same time, in the law department's small hall in Grand Sky City, Qian Yudang received Lai Yejia's message. His expression changed. "I just ordered Ling Qi to lead the team back to Grand Sky City to report, but in the blink of an eye, Ling Qi was captured by a mysterious man. What's going on?" Too few things happened in the past few days. The Chun family suddenly had this kind of thing happen. Lai Yi led the team to kill all the cultivators, followed by the outbreak of the insect tide on the fog cliff, and now the mysterious man suddenly made a move to capture the spiritual power. All these unforeseen events made it difficult for people to react. Looking at all the changes in the past few days, the Chun family was suspected to be the source. It could even be said that the fog cliff was under the Chun family's jurisdiction. Qian Yudang faintly felt that there was a small, tangible hand pushing something in front of the curtain. The Chun family was just a chess piece placed on the surface. There were many things I could see behind the scenes. After a moment of thought, I immediately sent a message to Tang Yifeng. No matter what, I still had to inform the headmaster that Ling Qi was captured. When the headmaster received the message, he was in the middle of a meeting with the elders. A group of old men and women were making a racket. They were just short of rolling up their sleeves and fighting. The situation was chaotic. Before receiving the message, the headmaster immediately stood up. A moment later, a figure rushed out of Grand Sky City and headed in the direction of the Chan family. At the same time, a strong wind blew in the air and the scenery above quickly changed. Lai Yejia frowned and felt that the situation was becoming more and more confusing. "I think I understand why that mysterious man wanted to capture me. I originally thought that he wanted to kill me to silence me, but now it seems too likely. If he really wanted to kill me to silence me, he wouldn't have been able to do it. So he didn't want to kill me." Understanding this, Lai Yejia relaxed. Since he wanted to kill me, my temporary life is in danger. As for why he wanted to capture me, Lai Yejia understood. Lai Yejia could feel that the other party didn't seem to have any intention of winning me over. But if they wanted to win me over, why did they want to capture me? Ling Qi really didn't want to have anything to do with that kind of organization, so when he came into contact with the people of that organization for the 7th time, he was determined to fight with the other party. It was also a way to express his attitude and position, but now it seems that I had to avoid some things in the end. At this moment, I'm being carried by this man's hand and slowly flying away. I resisted, mainly because I resisted. Just now, this man pressed his palm on my chest, causing the Lu Yi in my body to become chaotic. I still haven't calmed down yet. "He can escape," Lai Yejia suddenly said. If they knew that he was captured like that, it might be more bad luck than good luck. But in the surrounding area, the Shaolin cultivators' voices and sleeves were all present. The brigade would definitely know and send out the news. If the law department also knew and took action, without the law department taking the lead, The Laoi cultivators in the distance would be able to quickly mobilize. Although the mysterious man's strength was weak, if he wanted to take him away in that kind of situation, it would be wishful thinking. So Ling Qi didn't panic at all. "What if you escape?" the man replied. His voice was still so firm, like a lover whispering in my ear. "That's because he's weak." Ling Qi wanted to say something, mainly to gather your energy. "How about you make a bet? If you can escape, you cut his tongue. If you escape, we'll die together. How about it?" Ling Qi hurriedly shut up. "No matter what, I don't have anything good to do. That bet is fine. This man is really vicious." The man chuckled loudly. "How did you say something?" At that moment, a figure slowly swept over from behind. Before it even got close, it shouted, "Let him go. Reinforcements are here." Ling Qi was delighted. Although he recognized that Lin Yinxiu, if she had received the news and came to intercept this man, he immediately secretly urged his Lai Yejia, waiting for their hands to meet to launch a sneak attack on that vicious woman. He wanted to do something to her. He wanted to give her less trouble and increase his chances of escaping. But who knew that the mysterious man was already on guard against me? Ling Qi had just pushed his Luyi when he felt a weak power surge out from the man's palm. The fierce power poured into his body, scattering the Luyi he had spent so much effort to condense. With a muffled groan, he urged his Luyi again. Facing this intercepting Lin Yinxiu, the mysterious man didn't have any intention of dodging. Just like that, he met her head-on. Their auras and Luyi were released, and there was no divine sense surging. Ling Qi couldn't see how the two of them fought. He only knew that the moment the two figures crossed, there was no muffled groan. Then Lin Yinxiu, who had come to intercept him, fell down. The man's figure only paused for a moment before continuing to rush back. This person was this man's opponent, and the gap between them was very small. If this man was given enough time, he wouldn't even be able to kill this person. Ling Qi's heart went cold. Along the way, there were many Lin Yinxiu who rushed over to intercept the mysterious man. They were all casually dealt with by Yu. This made Ling Qi realize how terrifying this man's strength was. The weaker Yu appeared, the lighter Ling Qi's mood became. Only when a brilliant aura rushed over from the direction of Grand Sky City did Ling Qi's expression turn happy. "Because I sensed that the aura belonged to the sect leader. A troublesome fellow has come." The mysterious man clearly sensed that the sect leader was weak. He turned his head and glanced over, his expression serious. "Your sect leader is here. Let you go quickly. Otherwise, I'll make sure he dies here," Lai Yi said fiercely. "It's Tang Yifeng." The man suddenly realized. "I can afford to offend him." As you said that, your body suddenly fell down. In the distance, the sect leader's eyes were like torches. He shouted gently, "Who cares who he is? If he dares to hurt your sect's disciples, I'll tear him to pieces even if he's at the ends of the earth." His voice was supported by Lai Yi and spread hundreds of miles away. His anger burned fiercely. In front of the sect leader, wind and clouds gathered as if a god had descended. The man brought Lai Yi and landed behind a cave. He turned around and looked at the headmaster, who came with a weak aura. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Elder Tang. This big man is only borrowing his disciple for a period of time. It will definitely be beneficial to me. I ask for Elder Tang's concern." As he said that, he lifted Ling Qi's collar and turned to retreat into the cave. Nearby, when Tang Yifeng saw this scene, his speed slowed down a bit. In the cave, Ling Qi turned his head to look at his surroundings. He suddenly had a bad premonition. Sure enough, as the leaves around the man surged, complicated patterns lit up in the cave. In the blink of an eye, a small formation was activated. In the area covered by the small formation, the void distorted. Transportation formation. Ling Qi's heart sank to the bottom. Chapter 997. Before the sect leader arrived, he saw the space near the cave suddenly distort and then return to normal. In the perception of his divine sense, the mysterious woman and Lu Ye's aura disappeared without a trace at this moment. Teleportation formation. The sect leader was experienced and knowledgeable, and could tell at a glance what had happened in the cave. Clearly, a teleportation formation had been activated. Unwilling to give up, he dove down into the cave. However, there was no trace of Lu Yi. Even the teleportation portal that had been set up here at some point in time had been destroyed. Clearly, they were afraid that someone would use this formation to track their whereabouts. Without stopping, the sect leader quickly walked out of the cave and stood at the entrance with a cold expression. After a moment of thought, he sent a message to Qian Wudong. Find a way to get a tracking plate. This old man wants to use it. Now, if he wanted to track Lu Ye's whereabouts, he could only use the tracking plate. Although it was rare, the Army State Guard would definitely have a stockpile of it. With Qian Wudong's status as the head of the law department and the sect leader's current status as an elder of the elder group, it was naturally no problem to get a tracking plate. When the teleportation formation in the cave was activated, Lu Yi felt his entire body falling into a bottomless abyss, which was extremely uncomfortable. Especially at this moment, the spiritual power in his body was scattered and difficult to condense, which made it even more difficult. He thought to himself that it wasn't that the teleportation formation he had set up had this problem, but that the teleportation formation itself had this flaw. The scale of this teleportation formation was larger than the ones he had set up before, so the teleportation distance must be further. As for how far it could teleport, it was difficult to estimate. This was an opportunity. If he was uncomfortable, the mysterious woman would be uncomfortable as well. Perhaps he could try to sneak attack her the moment the teleportation ended. Thinking of this, Lu Yi hurriedly condensed his scattered spiritual power. Time passed extremely slowly at this moment. Suddenly, the feeling of weightlessness from falling into the bottomless abyss disappeared, and he stepped on something solid. Lu Yi immediately turned his head and saw that the mysterious woman was right beside him. Her body was swaying slightly as if she was drunk. Under their feet, a large formation hummed, and lines of runes bloomed with dazzling light. Lu Yi desperately urged the little bit of spiritual power he had condensed, and the mountain blade was suddenly unsheathed, stabbing straight at the woman's slender neck. The power of this strike was less than half of his usual power, but it was his full power at this moment. The long saber stopped. The tip of the saber was only an inch away from piercing the woman's neck. Under the mask, the mysterious woman's lips curled up slightly as if she was mocking him. Two jade fingers clamped down on the mountain pan saber, and no matter how much force Lu Yi exerted, she couldn't move an inch. "Little fellow, you're misbehaving. You should be punished," the woman said coquettishly. Her other hand slowly reached out, her thumb and middle finger interlocked, and under Lu Ye's gaze, she gently flicked his forehead. Boom! Lu Yi, on the other hand, felt as if he had been hit by a mountain. His whole body flew to the side of the cliff and slammed into it. Rubble rustled down. Lu Yi maintained his posture and slowly slid down the rock wall. He only felt a buzzing sound in his head and couldn't see anything for a while. After a long while, he slowly came back to his senses and looked up. The mysterious woman's enchanting figure was standing in front of him. She had already taken off her mask, and there was a smile on her face as she looked at him meaningfully. It was undeniable that this woman was extremely charming, and with her enchanting figure, she was definitely a stunner that all men yearned for even in their dreams. But looking at her smile right now, Lu Yi felt as if she were a poisonous snake. Under the woman's gaze, he silently stood up and sheathed the mountain pan saber. Raising his hand, he said, "Let's go." As he spoke, he shook his head. The dizziness still hadn't dissipated. The teleportation formation's influence was one thing, but the other was the fact that he had been flicked in the head. The woman was startled. "Where are we going? Where are you taking me?" asked Lu Yi. The woman stared at him in a daze for a while before smiling. "So you've already accepted your fate. Wasn't that strike just now quite fierce?" Lu Ye's forehead was throbbing. That wasn't an illusion, but rather a large bruise. People have no choice but to lower their heads under the eaves. What's the point of being fierce? If I can't beat you, then I can't beat you. The woman's eyes narrowed, emitting a dangerous light. "You're so flexible. I don't think keeping you alive is a wise move. Right now, you must be thinking that it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. What do you want?" Lu Yi frowned. The woman said leisurely, "Maybe it's better to just kill you right here. If you wanted to kill me, you would have done it long ago. Why go through so much trouble?" Lu Yi snorted. "Besides, If you really killed me, would you be able to justify it? As soon as he said that, the smile on the woman's face slowly disappeared. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. As expected, there was someone behind this woman. What he said just now was just a casual test. The way he saw it, that mysterious organization had contacted him twice with the intention of drawing him to their side. Since it was an organization, it wouldn't be the woman who said it alone. Under such circumstances, the woman might have been under someone's orders to kidnap him. But this was just his own guess. After a casual test, he found that it was similar to what he thought. However, such a mysterious organization had the ability to forcibly kidnap him under the watchful eyes of so many Spirit Sea Realm masters. What did they see in him? His cultivation had indeed improved rapidly, but right now, he was only a true Lake Fifth Order cultivator, so what could he accomplish? Or perhaps they really did see his potential and wanted to take advantage of him while he was still a fledgling to control him. Lu Ye's mind was filled with all sorts of distracting thoughts, but before he could react, the woman flicked his forehead again. But this time the other party obviously didn't use any strength, only lightly flicking his forehead. Don't be so smart people die early, the woman said meaningfully before turning around and walking out. Come with me, the Jia family's temple master will definitely catch up, so you'd better not make any unnecessary movements, otherwise I'll tie you up and make you look bad. Lu Ye clutched his head, a look of humiliation on his face as he swore in his heart that sooner or later, he would return these 2 slaps 10 times, 100 times over, so he quickly followed the woman's figure. With the woman's warning, Lu Ye really didn't dare to make any unnecessary movements. What's more, he could clearly perceive that although the woman's back was facing him, there was a wisp of her divine sense lingering around him. If he made any abnormal movements, it would inevitably be noticed by the woman. This place was also a cave with a transmission array that was connected to the previous one. Before leaving, the woman destroyed the transmission array here. Walking out of the cave, she wrapped Lu Ye in her spirit chi and flew up into the air. After flying for a while, she descended again and brought Lu Ye into another cave, where they left through the transmission array here. Along the way they passed through 4 transmission arrays, and in the end Lu Ye didn't even know where he was or whether he was still in the war province. He wanted to investigate his whereabouts, but if he really did so, it would definitely not end well, so he could only give up. Judging from his experience along the way, the other party's operation this time was extremely meticulous, and the several large-scale transmission arrays were the best proof. Lu Ye even had a feeling that the other party's meticulous arrangements were to capture him. With so many transmission arrays, no one could catch up to them. After the last transmission, the mysterious woman destroyed the transmission array as usual, and brought Lu Ye to a waterfall. She flew up, passed through the waterfall, and arrived at a karst cave behind the waterfall. Stay here and don't move, the woman ordered. Then she walked to the side and raised her hand to press the void. Lu Ye looked up, not knowing what she was doing, but he soon showed a look of surprise. Because when the woman pressed her hand, a circle of ripples suddenly spread out, and as the ripples spread, the void in front of her gradually began to distort. In less than 10 breaths of time, the distorted void opened an entrance to a passage. The entrance was in the shape of a vortex, and inside it was a void of nothingness, as if it could even swallow one's line of sight. Looking inside, one could see nothing but a dark hole. Secret realm. Lu Ye was shocked. There was an entrance to a secret realm here, and it seemed to be controlled by this mysterious woman. This made him think of the Wuxia continent. There were similar secret realms on the Wuxia continent, 3 of which were controlled by the human clan and 1 by the corpse clan. The 3 secret realms of the human clan had been drifting in the void, and the entrances were erratic, but the entrance to the secret realm of the corpse clan was fixed in one place. He just didn't expect that there would be a secret realm controlled by someone in the 9 states. Go in. The woman opened the entrance to the secret realm and turned to Lu Ye. Lu Ye really didn't want to go in. Although his movements were restricted before, he was still in the 9 states. If he acted properly, he could still contact the sect leader or Gan Wudong and ask them to find a way to save him. But if he entered the secret realm, the situation would be completely different. The secret realm was another world, separated from the 9 states, and imprints couldn't be sent out. Lu Ye had been to many secret realms, so he naturally knew this. In other words, once he entered this secret realm, it would be difficult to contact the sect leader and the others. But at this moment he was on the chopping block and it was not up to him. Seeing the woman's impatient expression and raising her hand to grab him, Lu Yi decisively stepped toward the entrance of the secret realm. His vision turned dark, and then light shone brightly. A fragrant wind lingered around him, and the mysterious woman walked in. Lu Yi looked back and saw a whirlpool at the entrance of the secret realm. Lu Yi thought for a moment and gave up on the idea of rushing back. The mysterious woman turned around and did the same thing as before to close the entrance. Only then did she stretch her body and grumble, "I'm exhausted." Her figure was extremely enchanting to begin with, and these movements caused her curves to seem even more soul-stirring. Lu Yi glared at her fiercely. He reached out and grabbed her breasts, rubbing them. Leather book. Address. Chapter 998. The mysterious woman obviously noticed Lu Ye's gaze, but she didn't care much. She just raised the corners of her mouth slightly. Lu Yi looked past her and saw a man in a black robe standing quietly not far away. He wasn't tall, but he was very sturdy. This person didn't move at all, standing with his hands down. The arrival of the woman and Lu Yi didn't attract much attention from him. He just glanced at them and then lowered his eyes, continuing to stand there quietly. Another Divine Sea Realm cultivator, and an individual cultivator. Lu Yi was slightly shocked. However, this person gave Lu Yi a strange feeling. His expression was dull, and the light in his eyes was dim. He didn't look very smart. Lu Yi didn't know if it was an illusion. On the side, the mysterious woman stretched and then said to Lu Yi, "Let's go." She stepped forward, and Lu Yi could only follow. Almost at the same time when the mysterious woman took Lu Yi into this secret realm, somewhere in the military province Tangifeng, who was flying rapidly in the sky, suddenly stopped. He was holding a tracing disc in his hand. The needle of the tracing disc had been pointing in the direction of Lu Yi, but just now, the needle suddenly spun rapidly and showed no signs of stopping at all. If the needle didn't stop, he couldn't accurately track Lu Ye's position. The sect leader frowned and stared at the tracing disc for a moment. He had a guess in his heart. Then he checked his battlefield imprint and found that Lu Ye's imprint was in a state of being uncontactable. He immediately understood that Lu Yi should have entered a sealed secret realm. That was why the tracing disc could track the whereabouts of the spiritual tattoos and why the imprint of the battlefield was in a state of connection. Fortunately, the imprint hadn't dissipated, which meant that Ling Wen's life was not in danger. He was relieved, but there was nothing he could do. On the other side, the people of Ding Si Brigade had also been trying to contact Ling Wen, but they didn't get any response. Until now, they had completely lost contact with Ling Wen. Yi burst into tears, and Feng Yuechan and Lin Yinxiu quickly comforted her. Xiao Xinghe and Li Baxian glanced at each other. Both of them were deeply worried and felt even more powerful. When Jiarong was captured, we were at the side. But when facing a small cultivator like Lu Yuemei, all our resistance was futile. We could only watch helplessly as Jiarong was captured. Naturally, our hearts were filled with worry. Right now, the spirit runes know where they are and they are not safe. However, even if we want to save them, we don't have the means to do so. Let's return to Vast Sky City first and ask the sect master and I to come forward. Xiao Xinghe couldn't make a decision very slowly. In the current situation, the few of us don't have any solutions. The only thing we can't do is to ask Qian Yudang and Tang Yifeng to step in. That's why there's no possibility of saving the spirit inscriptions. That person just now was. In the famous secret realm, Ling Wen followed the mysterious man and tried to get some information. He was hoping that the man would say something to him, but the man still said, "He can't call me Dao 18. Dao 18? Ling Wen frowned. What kind of strange name was that? It was definitely just a name. What else could there be? However, the 18 types of women was a serial number. This was something worth thinking about. Without Dao 18, how could he not have Dao 1 or Dao 7? The man didn't want to explain too much to me. While walking to the back, he said, he used to live there. Someone restricted his freedom. He could do whatever he wanted. Do you understand? Ling Wen had a puzzled look on his face. He didn't capture you to imprison you? What enmity? No one wants to see him. The people in front of him? Ling Wen gasped. We'll just have to wait, the man said impatiently. At this moment he walked to a wooden house by the lake and took a detour. Then he closed the door with a bang. Only a wisp of fragrance lingered at the tip of my nose. Ling Wen stood on the spot and muttered to himself. Then he quickly turned around and headed to the secret realm's entrance. As expected, the man didn't have any intention of stopping me. Ling Wen soon arrived at the entrance. He glanced at Dao 18, who was standing outside like a door god. Open the entrance. You want to go out? The entrance of a secret realm required some ordinary methods to open. Jiarong naturally knew how to open it. However, since Dao 18 was guarding outside, I knew that too. That person seemed to be too stupid. Ling Wen wanted to see if I could let him out. Although the possibility was small, how would he know if he could give it a try? Dao 18 quickly raised his eyes and looked at me with an expressionless face. He said in a hoarse voice, "Warrant." Ling Wen didn't have a warrant. He grabbed the warrant at his waist and waved it at Dao 18. Open the entrance. The warrant is a talisman. Dao 18's hoarse voice resounded. Then, he lowered his eyes and stood there like a wooden pillar. The corner of Jiarong's eyes twitched. Looking at his behavior and mannerisms, he didn't seem like a woman at all. Was that fellow a living person? Was he like Master's clone, a creation of Yinsher? But even her master's doppelganger, which was called Big Butterfly, was much more agile than Dao 18. Dao 18 gave Jiarong the impression that he was wooden and stiff. With or without the warrant, there was naturally a way for Dao 18 to open the secret realm. At the very least, he was sure that Dao 18 could really open the secret realm. Ling Wen turned to look at the mysterious man's wooden house. Then, he ended his exploration of the secret realm. More than an hour ago, he had figured out the environment outside the Spirit Rune tutorial. It was a huge mystic realm. It was not much different from the sword instrument sect's mystic realm that he had visited previously. However, it was only half the size of the sword instrument sect's mystic realm. There was no sun or moon shining in the sky in the secret realm. There was no light, so it looked like a cloudy day. The border of the secret realm was empty. Just looking at it gave one a feeling of peace. Jiarong naturally dared to barge in. Who knew that he wouldn't be able to enter? The environment outside was really monotonous. There was only a lake, and around the lake was a sparse forest. There were beasts and birds. The mysterious man retreated and didn't appear in the wooden house. You weren't tired from that trip, so I was resting. Ling Wen thought about it and walked to the forest to cut down a few trees. He personally built a wooden house by the lake. Since he had a way to leave, he could only take things as they came. I was also curious about who the person on the man's back was and why he had captured him. He knew that if he stayed outside for a long time, he wouldn't have a place to stay. Ling Wen was familiar with building a wooden house and a bamboo house. After all, he had done it many times in the future. In just 2 hours, a 7-story wooden house was built. It was just across the lake from the mysterious man's wooden house. Although the mysterious man didn't show any kindness to me from the beginning to the end, I had to be vigilant. With his cultivation, I had to be careful. Ling Wen set up some tactical formations in the distance of his wooden house, mainly for warning and isolation purposes. As for protection, it was necessary. The mysterious man was so weak. If he wanted to do something to me, I couldn't stop him with the protective tactical formations alone. It was better to waste my energy. Over the past few days, Ling Wen spent some time walking around in the secret territory. Every time I did that, I could faintly feel a spiritual sense quietly watching me. Obviously, it was the mysterious man who was spying on me. Ling Wen thought so too. The famous secret realm was so small, and the mysterious man's cultivation was so low. Unless I hid in my wooden house, I couldn't care less about him. It was the same as being right under the other party's nose. Hiding was just a matter of hiding. Only the wooden house that I didn't set up a tactical formation could be isolated from the man's divine sense. Other than investigating the secret realm, Jiarong used the rest of her time to stimulate the power of her talent tree and devour the fire spirit stone. When I was captured by Lu Yuemei, I felt a sense of crisis. As my cultivation improved, the chances of encountering Lu Yuemei became smaller and smaller. If it was someone on my side, it would be fine. But if it was someone in the spirit sea realm or an enemy like the mysterious man, with my current strength I couldn't resist at all. In fact, the next time Lingwen was chased by a spirit sea realm cultivator, he still felt a sense of crisis. It was just that without the protection of the sect master, the sense of crisis faded a little. Until now, when the sect master didn't protect me, it was more reliable to count on him. I could beat others, but at least I had to be slow. Only then could I increase my chances of survival. The flying wings Lu Yi alone was enough. Now that I was in the 7th order True Lake realm, even with the flying wings and windwalk, my speed was still slower than Lu Yuemei. This was something that I didn't verify when I was chased by a spirit sea realm cultivator. Therefore, Lingwen urgently needed a new method. A method to escape from Lu Yuemei's pursuit. I didn't have any expectations, but to achieve this I had to rely on the talent tree. As long as this Lu Yi could be activated under the talent tree, I wouldn't be able to escape from an enemy that I had defeated in the past. I had been thinking about this Lu Yi for a long time. I didn't have many ideas and plans for how to use this Lu Yi, but unfortunately I didn't activate it. But I was sure that this Lu Yi didn't exist under the talent tree. Jia Rong just didn't know the order. Therefore, I stopped devouring the fire spirit stone and wanted to try my luck. During that time I didn't activate a new Lu Yi. The main reason was that I activated a Lu Yi the next time, which was enough for me to digest for a while. It wasn't until a few days later that Lingwen understood the true use of the twin lotus flowers on one stalk. Adhering to the principle of biting off more than you can chew, Lingwen decided to activate it under the talent tree. Now that the use of the twin lotus flowers on one stalk wasn't clear, it was naturally time to activate a new Lu Yi. I didn't have a small amount of fire spirit stones under me. In the past few months I had been refining exploding fire spirit stones for the law division. I had obtained quite a few, so activating a few new Lu Yi shouldn't be a problem. As for whether I could get the one I wanted, it all depended on luck. That day, Lingwen had just returned from patrolling the sealed world. When he passed by the mysterious man's wooden house, the other party opened the window and a charming face entered my sight. He looked at me with a smile and asked, "He's been staying there all day. What is he looking for?" Chapter 999. I'm bored, so I'm just taking a walk, Lu Yi said perfunctorily. The mysterious woman naturally wouldn't easily believe his words, but the corners of her mouth revealed a thought-provoking smile. Lu Yi was obviously looking for a way to leave this secret realm. However, there was only one exit and it was guarded by Dao 13. His efforts were destined to be in vain. Let's exchange imprints, Lu Yi suddenly said. The woman was a bit surprised and looked at him with amusement. You want to exchange imprints with me? What's the problem? What do you want to do? The woman looked at him warily. If you don't want to, then forget it. Lu Yi didn't force her. He turned and left. Wait. The woman stopped him. She raised her hand and touched her battlefield imprint. A blue light floated toward Lu Yi. Lu Yi was shocked. You're from the Haotian Alliance. He thought she was from the Demon's Ridge, so she caught him. He didn't expect her to be from the Haotian Alliance. The woman smiled but didn't say anything. She looked mysterious. Lu Yi calmed herself down and said, How should I address you? Are you trying to find out more about me? The woman leaned against the window with her arms crossed in front of her chest. She looked a little lazy, but this laziness only added to her charm. Especially when her arms were crossed, her breasts were even more magnificent. Although she said that, she still said her name. Yu Daiwei. Lu Yi nodded slightly. He turned and walked back to his wooden house. As he walked, he checked his battlefield imprint. There were a lot of imprints in it. They were all exchanged after he stepped on the path of cultivation. These imprints were basically uncontactable. Only the one that belonged to Yu Daiwei could be contacted. Lu Yi wouldn't exchange imprints with a mysterious spirit ocean realm cultivator for no reason. He just wanted to verify one thing. Was this secret realm still within the 9 states? Now it seemed that this secret realm was within the 9 states. Therefore, Yu Daiwei's imprint could be contacted under the cover of Heaven's Secrets. However, because the secret realm was separated from the world, there was no way to contact the outside world. This was the same as the secret realm of the realm of beasts that Lu Yi experienced. In the secret realm of the realm of beasts, Lu Yi could contact Yi. Another day passed and Lu Yi was in the wooden house, urging the power of the talent tree to absorb the power of the fire spirit stone, when the wooden house's restriction was suddenly triggered. He quickly stopped what he was doing and got up to open the door. Yu Daiwei stood outside the door with a solemn expression. "Come with me, someone wants to see you." Lu Yi raised his eyebrows, thinking to himself that the main character had finally appeared. Previously, he had deduced that there was someone behind Yu Daiwei, and that it was that person who ordered her to capture him. However, these days, other than Dao Shisan, who was guarding the entrance, he and Yu Daiwei were the only two people in the secret territory. He guessed that the mastermind must have been delayed by something, so he didn't show up. But the other party would show up sooner or later. Lu Yi really wanted to know why that person ordered Yu Daiwei to capture him here. "Let's go." Lu Yi walked out of the log cabin. Yu Daiwei turned around and led the way. The last time he had followed behind her, she had walked in an enchanting manner, her small waist swaying like a water snake. This time, however, she was much more serious. Her entire charming temperament had been replaced by a quiet and well-behaved aura. Lu Yi realized more and more how powerful the mastermind was. Someone who could make a powerhouse like Yu Daiwei so respectful was naturally not an ordinary person. The mastermind was not far away, sitting on a chair in front of Yu Daiwei's wooden house, fishing with a fishing rod in his hand. When they approached, Yu Daiwei bowed. "My lord, I've brought him." "My lord." Lu Yi frowned slightly. This was not a title that ordinary people could accept. The lord looked ordinary, and there was nothing special about him. If such a person stood in a crowd, Lu Yi wouldn't even look at him. But with Yu Daiwei's respect, Lu Yi knew that this person was not to be underestimated. The lord turned his head to look at him, his eyes as deep as the sea, with a hint of scrutiny. Suddenly he laughed loudly, looking very carefree. Even Yu Daiwei was confused for a moment. She didn't know why the lord was so happy. Lu Yi was even more confused by his laughter. "Sit." After a while, the High Lord finally stopped smiling and said to Lu Yi, "Brother Lu Yi, please go ahead." There was a chair next to him, obviously prepared for Lu Yi. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then sat down casually. He looked at the fishing float in the lake and said, "There are no fish in this lake." When he first arrived a few days ago, he had investigated this lake. It was a dead lake. Other than the clear water, there were only some weeds and insects. There were no fish at all. The Lord smiled gently. His smile was warm and very infectious. Whether there are fish or not, fishing depends on one's mood. Lu Yi couldn't help but think that there was something wrong with this person's brain, but he couldn't figure out the style of such an expert. The Lord continued, "Besides, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist." The fishing float suddenly moved. The High Lord raised his hand, and a fresh carp was hooked up. Lu Ye's eyes widened a little. He really couldn't understand why. When he went to investigate the lake previously, he didn't see any fish. Where did the carp that the Lord caught come from? After calming himself down, he suddenly said, "Chun Tianshui is one of your people." He had not thought of this before, but when he heard Yu Daiwei address this person as Lord, Lu Yi suddenly recalled the words Chun Tianshui had said before he died. As expected of the person he fancied, Lu Yi didn't hear it clearly at that time, but there were too many suspicious points about the Chun family that day. There were many things that he couldn't understand. However, if Chun Tianshui said before he died, as expected of the person the Lord fancied, then it made sense. The topic changed too quickly. Even someone like the Lord couldn't react in time. However, he admitted it quickly. "That's right. Chun Tianshui is my man. Your insight is very sharp. Can you tell me how you found out?" "I guess." Lu Yi shook his head and didn't intend to explain. "If you want to harm me, why did you capture me?" Yu Daiwei helped the Lord take off the hook and put the bait on again. The Lord threw the bait into the water and then said, "Although Chun Tianshui is my man, the Chun family's matter has nothing to do with me. It was Chun Tianshui who made the decision on his own, so his death isn't regrettable. I've never wanted to harm you. Let me put it this way. If there's one person in the world who doesn't want to harm you, it's me." Lu Yi ignored his words. How could he believe such words that were used to coax a child? Then why did the Lord ask someone to bring me here? The Lord was silent for a while, then suddenly turned to look at Lu Yi. What do you think of the world situation? The topic changed too quickly. Lu Yi was stunned. He frowned and said, I'm just one of the many living things. I'm just going with the flow. You underestimate yourself too much. The Lord smiled and raised his fishing rod. This time he caught nothing. The bait on the hook was gone. He put down the fishing rod and didn't have the intention to continue fishing. He said slowly, the world is bustling with activity. The two big camps are fighting against each other. It has been more than 2,000 years since there were records. In such a long time, how many heroes of the 9 prefectures have fallen? How many young talents have failed? How many sects have been annihilated? The number of cultivators who die every year is incalculable. This topic was too heavy. It was so heavy that Lu Yi couldn't interrupt. Moreover, he didn't have the right to comment on this issue. Since the beginning of every cultivator's cultivation, the Grand Heaven Alliance killed the Myriad Devil Ridge, and the Myriad Devil Ridge killed the Grand Heaven Alliance. This concept was deeply ingrained and couldn't be easily shaken. Lu Yi was just one of the cultivators in the 9 prefectures. Naturally, he was not an exception. Not to mention other things, the number of Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who died in his hands in the past few years was not small. Because of his actions, the Myriad Devil Ridge also hated him to the core. But why does the world have to be like this? Can't it be something else? Lu Yi frowned. Lord, what do you want it to be like? The Lord smiled faintly with a longing expression. Without the Grand Heaven Alliance and the Myriad Devil Ridge, there will naturally be no endless confrontation between the two camps. Mortals can live and work in peace, and cultivators can cultivate steadily. The world will be at peace, without the disturbance of war, and without the confrontation between the camps. There will be no conflict. It's a good world, but the Lord is thinking too much. Lu Yi's heart trembled. How big was the Lord's ambition? He actually wanted to unify the 9 prefectures and eliminate the gap between the camps. However, this kind of thing was simply impossible to achieve. The Lord also said that the confrontation between the two camps has been going on for more than 2,000 years. There is a blood feud between the two camps. How can it be easily resolved? It can't be easily resolved, but it doesn't mean that there is no way to resolve it. In the end, it all depends on human effort. Are you thinking that I want to unify the 9 prefectures? The Lord didn't answer but asked instead. Lu Yi didn't feel embarrassed that his thoughts were exposed. Isn't that so? The Lord shook his head. Someone tried to do this a few decades ago. He almost succeeded, but in the end he still failed. That person is extremely talented. I admit that I am not as good as him. If he couldn't do it, I naturally can't do it either. Lu Yi understood who he was talking about. Other than his senior martial brother, there was no one else. It seems that this lord is related to his senior martial brother. However, that person relied on the Grand Heaven Alliance. In the final battle, the Myriad Devil Ridge faced a strong counterattack. It is reasonable that he failed at the last step. Therefore, he wanted to borrow the Grand Heaven Alliance or the Myriad Devil Ridge's camp to completely eliminate the other party. It won't work. The hatred between the two camps is as deep as the sea. Who would be willing to be eliminated by the other? The more oppressed, the stronger the counterattack. That person failed because of this reason. However, what if there is another camp in this world? A brand new camp that can accept all the people. Do you think that if such a camp really appears, many people will come to join it? Lu Yi's frown deepened. That will depend on the foundation of this camp. He faintly felt that the Lord's next words were going to be earth-shattering. I want to take all the women in the world into my harem, and have fun every night. The Lord said leisurely. Lu Yi's face darkened. He raised his mouth and said, he shit on you. Just wait to be eliminated. Chapter 1000. That's the point. The High Lord was a little excited. Since it's a new faction, it will naturally be different from Grand Sky Alliance and Myriad Demon Ridge. A new faction will not compete with others. I believe that if this is true, it will definitely attract a large number of cultivators. In this world, there are many cultivators who are tired of the conflict between the two factions. Yu Daiwei stood behind the Great Lord and looked at the excited expression on his face. She was in disbelief. She had followed the High Lord for so many years, but she had never seen such an expression on his face. What was even more unbelievable was that the person who made the High Lord react this way was actually a young man at the Fifth Order True Lake Realm. She was well aware of the Great Lord's arrogance. Even the sect masters and sect masters of the top sects in the 9 prefectures might not be regarded highly by the Great Lord. In the eyes of the Great Lord, those so-called sect masters and sect masters were mostly rotten people. But now, seeing the High Lord and Wuxia talking so happily, as if they were discussing the Tao, how could she not be surprised? She also felt that the High Lord valued this young man even more. But even she didn't know why the High Lord valued Wuxia so much. There should be. Wuxia nodded. If such a faction really appeared in this world, it was very likely that it would attract many people to join it. Just as the High Lord said, there were many people who were tired of the conflict between the two factions, but most of the time they couldn't do anything about it. Most cultivators didn't have any enmity with each other. Just because they were in opposing factions, there was no reason for them to fight. Wuxia changed the topic and said, "Generously speaking, the Heavenly Secret Merchant Union is such a faction." The High Lord was stunned for a moment, then laughed. "It's the same. The Heavenly Secret Merchant Union is a business, so it can't be confused. We are indeed competing with others, but business doesn't pay attention to harmony and wealth. How can we compete with others?" High Lord wants to create such a faction? Wuxia understood what I meant. Primal chaos. The High Lord said, "Grand Sky Alliance Wuxia, one is yin, one is yang. Yin and yang coexist and harmonize yin and yang. Yin and yang together is primal chaos." So in the end, the High Lord wants to unify the 4 states. Wuxia hit the nail on the head. The Lord shook his head. Unifying the 4 prefectures is not your goal. You just want to change the current situation of the 4 prefectures. Wuxia fell silent. Indeed, it was a good thing that that person didn't have such ambitions. He was sure that he could really do that. This would be beneficial to the 4 states. The conflict between the 2 factions would become history, and very few people would die. However, there were some things that had good intentions, and the process would definitely be so beautiful. Panning could predict that there would be no faction called Chaos that would suddenly rise in that world, and the world of the 4 prefectures would only become more chaotic. If that's the case, why did the High Lord capture you? Wuxia asked the question in his heart. Even though the High Lord had told me so little, Wuxia still didn't understand why I wanted to capture him. You need him to help you. The High Lord looked at me with sincerity. Wuxia and I looked at each other for a moment, and then said, "The High Lord thinks too highly of you. You're just a great True Lake Realm cultivator. How can you help the High Lord achieve such a small goal? You said that he has to think highly of himself. He doesn't have his own power. This is the power you have." The High Lord smiled. As he spoke, he took out a palm-sized disc and handed it to Wuxia. Wuxia hesitated for a moment, and then reached out to take it. He looked at it carefully. The disc looked like it was made of stone, and there were many complicated patterns on the surface of the disc. It was dazzling to look at, and if one didn't look at it for a while it would make one feel dizzy, as if one's mind was being sucked into it. It was obviously a special stone disc, but Panning couldn't tell what it was. While Wuxia was observing the disc, the High Lord was observing me as well. Since I was a top-tier weakling at such a close distance, Wuxia was able to conceal even the slightest of reactions. However, the High Lord couldn't help but frown when he saw the disc. That was because there were some things that were quite similar to what I had expected. "What is it?" Wuxia asked. "He can tell?" the High Lord asked. Wuxia shook his head. The High Lord smiled and didn't explain anything. He took the strange stone disc back from Wuxia's hand. "He has something to do, so he can go back." The topic started abruptly, and we were talking about it just a moment ago. Wuxia also thought the same. He stood up and walked towards his wooden house. Before I left, Panningrong asked, "High Lord, am I the person he is looking for? Why is this so? It's not the right time." The High Lord leaned against the back of the chair and frowned. He didn't seem disappointed. "Then what is the stone disc?" Myriad Devil's Ridge couldn't hold back his curiosity. The High Lord played with the stone disc in his hand, and after a long time he said, "It's a token to create a new faction." Paningrong's pupils shrank. After following the High Lord for a long time, you naturally know some secrets that only a normal person would know. To create something like a faction, it's very complicated to talk about it, and it also requires a banner. It has to be denied by the heavens. Take the current Grand Sky Alliance and Paningrong as an example. They were both factions that were denied by the heavens. Thus, the battlefield imprints of Grand Sky Alliance's cultivators would be blue, while Luoye's would be red. The 4 prefectures were small and shrouded by the heavens. Everything had to go around the mysterious heavens. If they were denied by heaven's secrets, then even if they were to raise the banner of a new faction, they would not be able to last long. If they were denied by heaven's secrets, then they would be able to change the marks on the battlefield. When cultivators from the same faction met, they would be able to quickly determine who was friend or foe. Since there isn't such an item, why did the High Lord use it? Myriad Devil's Ridge asked. The High Lord had been preparing for the new faction. Now that there wasn't such an item, the creation of a new faction was just a snap of the fingers. The High Lord shook his head. You used it and so did he. Only those who aren't favored by the heavens can use this item. A few decades later, no one was qualified to use this item, but I hid it away because I had too much blood feud to bear. Even if I used this item, I still had a way to win over Luoye's people. Dozens of years ago, Yu Daiwei was probably the only one who wasn't qualified to use this item. But judging from my reaction just now, I must have used it. Otherwise, I would have known the use of this item before I got my hands on it. It's not the right time yet. The High Lord sighed in his heart. What should I do? Myriad Devil's Ridge didn't understand why the High Lord wanted him to capture Luoye. Obviously, it was for the stone plate. Now that Paningrong had a way to use the stone plate, its value was reduced slightly. If he could kill Luoye, it was not the right time yet. Since Luoye had a way to use the stone plate, it meant that it was possible in the past. But he couldn't just let him go. You don't have to control me. I will leave by myself. The High Lord stood up quickly as he said that. Myriad Devil's Ridge was shocked. The High Lord thinks I can leave that place? That place is a big secret realm. And the exit is guarded by Dao Shiba. Without the High Lords or your orders, Dao Shiba won't let you go. How can Paningrong, a true Lake Realm cultivator, not have a way to leave? Those who are blessed by the heavens can always do things that ordinary people can't. If I have a way to leave, then I'll be the person you're looking for. If I'm the person you're looking for, then I'll die of old age outside. The High Lord walked towards the exit. There is one thing I haven't told Myriad Devil's Ridge. Through close observation, I found that Luoye hasn't been enlightened. But Myriad Devil's Ridge reported that Chan Tianshui hadn't enlightened Luoye, which is not something that ordinary people can resist. Myriad Devil's Ridge's report can be wrong. In other words, Chan Tianshui did enlighten Luoye, but for some reason it didn't work on Luoye. That was also the reason why I smiled so happily when I first met Luoye. I needed a Luoye who could maintain her original self, a puppet before she was enlightened. Being blessed by the heavens and being able to do things that ordinary people can do makes me even more certain that Luoye isn't the person I'm looking for. After a while, Myriad Devil's Ridge sent the High Lord out of the secret realm. You stood there for a moment and then walked towards Luoye's wooden house. A moment ago, Luoye opened the door and looked at you with confusion. What is it? Myriad Devil's Ridge pointed at Dao Shiba. In the past, I would follow him without moving an inch, so you must try to escape. Then you turn to Dao Shiba. If that big brat doesn't try to open the secret realm's exit, kill him immediately. Yes, Dao Shiba replied. The High Lord said that those who are blessed by the heavens can always do things that ordinary people can do. You want to see how Yu Daiwei will leave that secret realm in that situation. If he was still able to escape from this place after being chased like that, that would be too despicable. The corner of Luoye's eyes twitched. Is he all right? Myriad Devil's Ridge pursed his lips and smiled. After he spoke so presumptuously, it's best to consider the difference in strength between you and him. Panning immediately put on a serious expression. Why did he do that? To guard against him, of course. Wuxia didn't think much of it. He's leaving? She looked up at the lake and didn't see the High Lord's figure. He obviously hadn't left yet. Once Myriad Devil's Ridge left, wouldn't Dao Shiba be the only one left? You should ask what you need to ask. If that's the case, let's discuss it. Wuxia looked at Dao Shiba. You understand why he asked me to keep an eye on you, but you have to move an inch, right? You don't have any privacy. What privacy is there for a prisoner in prison? Paningrong sneered. Panning said angrily, even if he caught you, you're still a human. He's going too far. His High Lord seems to have nothing to ask of you. You should tell on him the last time you saw me. Chapter 1001. Hearing Luye's words, Yu Daiwei thought for a moment, then turned to 13 and said, Don't go into this room. Whenever he shows his face, follow him closely. You must not leave his side. Yes, Dao 13 still responded woodenly. Stay here. Yu Daiwei looked at him mockingly before turning around and walking towards the exit of the sealed world. It seemed that she was really going to leave. Lu Yi stepped forward and followed. Yu Daiwei naturally knew what he meant and didn't stop him. A moment later, the exit of the sealed world opened and Yu Daiwei disappeared. After she disappeared, the exit of the sealed world quickly closed. Lu Yi turned to look at Dao 13, who was standing next to him. He wondered what his chances of killing Dao 13 were if he used Dragon Emperor. Although he didn't know what Dao 13's Divine Sea cultivation level was, he was certain that he was weaker than Yu Daiwei. However, after looking at Dao 13's sturdy body, Lu Yi gave up on his plan. It would be too difficult for him to kill such a Divine Sea cultivator head-on. Even if he was lucky enough to kill Dao 13, it wouldn't be of much help to his plan to escape. In the end, he would still be trapped in this sealed world. However, the Great Lord and Yu Daiwei had left, leaving only Dao 13, who didn't seem very smart. The opportunity he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Before, Yu Daiwei had been in this nameless sealed world and it was inconvenient for Lu Yi to do many things, but how could he just accept his fate? During the few days I was captured, I did everything I could. As for how to escape from this place, I did not have a clear plan. I thought that I could carry out the plan in a short time, but the opportunity came too late. He walked back to his wooden house with Dao 18 following closely behind. Just as Feng Shuangfei had instructed, they were separated. Lingwen tried to communicate with me, but Dao 18 didn't respond, so he simply gave up. Inside the wooden house, Lingwen sat cross-legged and immersed himself in observing the talent tree. During those few days, I used the power of the talent tree to devour all the fire spirit stones in my hands. Under the tree, not a small amount of leaves were ignited. Among them, a small number of leaves did not bear Yijian. Even so, the spirit pattern gained 2 new land leaves. What exactly were those 2 new land leaves? The main reason why I hadn't investigated them was because I didn't have any expectations. I wanted to stimulate fewer land leaves and see if I could get what I wanted. However, the fire spirit stones in his eyes had not been completely consumed, and Feng Shuangfei had also left. Naturally, he could wait for a while longer. He had a vague feeling that the more he wanted something, the more he would be able to get it. Immersing his mind into it, the complicated and simple patterns under the leaves gradually became smaller in his field of vision. Then, a small amount of information flowed into his mind. Fortunately, I've already developed my divine sense, so I don't have much resistance against that kind of mental attack. I only feel a slight pain in my head, and it's fine. Yi Jian quickly understood the profoundness of new leaf construction, as the young master's information exploded in his mind. They were of the same breath and branch, sure enough. It was the Lu Yi that he was looking forward to. After carefully comprehending it, Yi Jian was slightly moved. The Lu Yi was not similar to the colorful spirit sea realm. They were both Lu Yi used to borrow power. But compared with the colorful spirit sea realm, it seemed to be more applicable. The colorful spirit sea realm was only used under 2 people, so that they could borrow each other's physical body. The same breath and branch was also borrowing power, but it was not limited to 2 people. No one within the range of the Lu Yi could borrow power from each other. As for the effect of borrowing power, it was hard to tell whether Yi Jian had tried it or not. In comparison, the two Lu Yijians had no advantages and disadvantages, and the same breath and branch was more suitable to be used to form a formation. It was very easy for cultivators of the same level to form a formation. Everyone's breath, cultivation, and temperament were the same, and they were all the resistance to forming a formation. Only those cultivators who got along with each other day and night, who had a close relationship with each other, or who had cooperated with each other for a long time, didn't have the opportunity to form a formation. Once the formation was formed, the cultivators' breaths were closely connected, and they could often exert power far beyond that of an individual. Therefore, from that point of view, the same breath and branch was not simply borrowing power, but combining the power of the cultivators of the same level, so that the cultivators could exert power beyond their own. That was a wrong Lu Yi, but it was of little use for the situation of the Eye of Spiritual Tattoos. I checked out the other Lu Yi. That was a divine tattoo that could only be activated by divine will. The moment spirit tattoos activated, he thought of his other divine tattoo, charm. The two clearly had little in common. When I was in Tianyuan City's secret realm, I used the charm divine tattoo to control an army of Zergs and killed them all. I gained a small amount of merit and exchanged it for a small amount of soul-cleansing water. However, the charm divine tattoo was more like bewitchment. Because of the charm divine tattoo, the highly intelligent Zergs disobeyed my orders. In comparison, the soul control divine tattoo was more effective. It was absolute control of the soul. One was bewitchment and deceit, while the other was enslavement. Naturally, they were the same. That Yijian spirit tattoo's eyes lit up. He stood up and pushed open the door of the wooden house. Dao 18 stood there like a wooden stake. His sturdy body looked loose, but it contained a shocking amount of explosive power. Raise your head, spirit tattoos instructed. Dao 18 acted as if he heard her. Spirit tattoos had no choice but to activate the soul control divine tattoo on Dao 18. After several encounters, spirit tattoos realized that Dao 18's intelligence was flawless. I was indeed weak, but how could I be so smart? Therefore, spirit tattoos wanted to try using the soul control divine tattoo on Dao 18. If I succeeded, I would be able to control Dao 18. At that time, I would be able to open the entrance of the secret realm and leave. Above the surging divine thoughts, Lingwen could clearly feel that there was no small resistance hindering his divine thoughts from behind. It seemed to be a barrier that could be seen by the naked eye. This was Dao 18's soul defense. Although that guy was smart, he was still Yu Dai Wei. How could it be so difficult to break through his soul defense? On the other hand, spirit tattoo's head buzzed. He felt as if he had bumped into an iron wall and felt dizzy. It was also a battle of souls, but it was obvious that Dao 18 was stronger. Shaking his head, spirit tattoo's vision quickly recovered. He saw that Dao 18 was looking at him with a frown. He didn't seem angry at all. Spirit tattoos calmed down a little and activated the soul control divine tattoo again. With a bang, the feeling of bumping into an iron wall came again. Spirit tattoo's body staggered, and his reaction was even smaller than before. Fortunately, spirit tattoos didn't feel thirsty. Instead, he felt nauseous, which was a sign that he had used too much energy. Simply activating the soul control divine tattoo wouldn't cause such a small reaction. However, spirit tattoos suffered a huge backlash because he was able to break through Dao 18's soul defense. He hurriedly took out a drop of soul-cleansing water and drank it. Only then did he recover. Looking up, spirit tattoos saw that Dao 18 was even angrier. His fists were clenched, and cracking sounds could be heard from his knuckles. His eyes were like copper bells, and cold air was coming out of his nostrils. He looked like he was about to beat someone up. The corner of spirit tattoo's eyes twitched. He couldn't help but feel guilty. He felt as if he was bullying an honest person. Hardening his heart, he used the soul control divine tattoo on Dao 18 for the 8th time. As the saying goes, things can be done 8 times. If it was effective again, there would be a chance. Yi Jianqian wasn't mentally prepared for this. Although I was lucky enough to give birth to a divine sense and a soul body, I was still the real Yi Jianqian. At the true lake realm, my soul was weak. However, to the real Yu Dai Wei, it was nothing. It was very difficult for her to break through Dao 18's soul defense. Another violent collision occurred, and spirit tattoos felt dizzy again. In his vision, there didn't seem to be a single fist that was slowing down. Soon after, he fell to the ground. After a while, Spirit Tattoos slowly woke up. After drinking a drop of soul-cleansing water, he felt a lot better. However, in the deity's lake, he had used up a lot of his divine sense. I quickly climbed up from the ground and shook my head. I felt that something wasn't right. Raising my hand, I wiped my nose and mouth. My hand was covered in blood. The memories after I fainted came back. I raised my head and stared at Dao 18 in rage. He punched you. Then my soul shook and I saw a fist slowly shrinking in my vision. Only now did I realize that I had been punched by Dao 18. Dao 18 held his head high and moved. Although I was quick-witted, I knew that I had done the right thing. The main thing was that I had restrained myself for a moment, which was my body's instinctive reaction. Spirit Tattoos was even more furious. His master told him to monitor you. Who told him to punch you? As he said that, he kicked Dao 18's chest. Dao 18's body shook, but he was calm. On the other hand, Spirit Tattoos' expression changed. He quickly retracted the leg that he had kicked out. One could see that his thigh was trembling. That fellow's body was really special. That kick didn't affect me at all. On the other hand, Spirit Tattoos' leg wasn't numb at all. After being kicked, Dao 18's body shrank. I didn't have a hunched body, but now I looked even hunchier. It was as if I had done something wrong. Have you ever done that before? Spirit Tattoos glared at me and closed the door. He squatted down and rubbed his thigh that wasn't cramping. I was sure that soul control didn't work on Dao 18. At the very least, once my soul power surpassed Dao 18's, it wouldn't work. I had a way to break through Dao 18's soul defense, so how could he control me? In the wooden house, Spirit Tattoos recovered for a while and activated the split shadow leaf. After a while, a split image formed from my own spirit energy and blood energy. I then used the twin lotus flowers on one stalk on the split image. The roots of the talent tree retreated into the shadow, and it slowly became real. Very slowly, a shadow that was 70% the size of the main body appeared. Chapter 1002. In the wooden house, Lu Yi condensed his doppelganger, took out his clothes, and threw them to the doppelganger to wear them. After checking carefully and making sure that there was nothing wrong, he constructed the concealment and aura concealment spirit runes to enhance himself and disappeared. The doppelganger pushed open the door. Dao 13, who was standing outside, looked up immediately. The clone ignored him and flew off into the distance. Dao 13 followed closely behind like a shadow. It was not until the doppelganger brought Dao 13 to the border of the nameless secret realm that Lu Ye's real body began to move. He sneaked out of the wooden house and went straight to the entrance. The entrance was some distance away from the lake. As long as he was careful enough, Dao 13 would not notice. When he arrived at the entrance, Lu Ye's real body appeared. Like Yu Dai Wei, he pressed his hand to the void and activated his spiritual power. Strictly speaking, the opening of the secret realm's entrance was the same as the opening of the storage bag's restriction lock. If the secret realm was regarded as a storage bag, then the secret realm's entrance would be the restriction lock. However, the restriction lock at the entrance of the secret realm was much more complicated than the restriction lock of the storage bag. Lu Yi had a lot of experience in opening restriction locks. After all, he had practiced it before. Given some time, he was confident that he could open the secret realm's entrance. However, after a few attempts, Lu Yi gave up. If he continued like this, his spiritual power would be too obvious. Dao 13 might notice him. After all, the secret realm was not big and Dao 13 was in the divine sea realm. If Dao 13 noticed him, the doppelganger's secret would be exposed. Dao 13 would follow Yu Dai Wei's orders and kill him. Setting up a concealment array formation here was one way, but Lu Yi couldn't guarantee that Yu Dai Wei or that High Lord wouldn't come in while he was doing this. If Yu Dai Wei or that High Lord came in and was caught red-handed, then things would become awkward. The risk was too great. This method would not work. Since that was the case, there was only one way left to escape from this place, and it was also the only way. Yu Dai Wei felt that with Lu Ye's ability and Dao 13's tight defense, there was no way he could leave the secret realm. However, it was not difficult for Lu Yi to leave. It would just take some time. His real body returned to the wooden house and continued to hide. The avatar brought Dao 13 to the entrance and sat down cross-legged. Increasing the distance between the main body and the doppelganger would reduce the chances of Dao Shan discovering the main body. After making sure that Dao 13's attention was on his doppelganger, he left the wooden house and flew in a certain direction. It didn't take long for them to reach their destination. He wasn't in a hurry to make a move. First, he set up some concealment formations in this area. Then he rummaged through his storage space. Soon he found a pick-shaped spirit tool. Digging. With the concealment of the array and the distance between them and Dao Shan, Lu Yi was not worried that he would be exposed. He went all out. His efficiency was still very high. In a short while, he had dug out a large hole and went all the way down. For the next 2 days, Lu Yi was busy here, directly digging out a hole that was more than 100 feet deep. With the last strike, something seemed to have been dug through, and rich world energy suddenly escaped, wrapping around the place where Lu Yi was. Lu Yi was overjoyed, knowing that he had found the spirit vein of this mystic realm. This was the key to leaving this place. With his previous experience on the Wuxia continent, Lu Yi naturally knew that small mystic realms separated from the great world relied on spirit veins or earth veins. Only then could the mystic realm be maintained for a long time. Back then, he had planted the divine pillars in several mystic realms on the Wuxia continent. The divine pillars had drained the earth veins of those mystic realms, causing the doors of those mystic realms to be exposed. It was the same in the sword instrument sect's mystic realm. The earth lung fire was what maintained the sword instrument sect's mystic realm. Back then he had spent 2 months activating the power of the talent tree to continuously absorb the earth lung fire, causing the sword instrument sect's mystic realm to completely collapse. With all these experiences, Lu Yi naturally knew that once the spirit vein of this mystic realm weakened to a critical point, the mystic realm would no longer be able to maintain itself. Therefore, in order to leave this mystic realm, he didn't actually need to open the door. He only needed to find a way to absorb the power of the spirit vein that the mystic realm relied on to quickly dry up the spirit vein. This method would definitely take a long time, but the advantage was that it was safe and covert. Previously, during the few days that Yu Daiwei was here, Lu Yi would spend some time walking around and looking around every day. However, it wasn't as simple as just walking around and looking around. He was just looking for the intersection of the spirit vein. According to his divine telekinesis, this was the place where the spirit vein was the shallowest, so he chose to dig a hole here. Now that the spirit vein had appeared, what he had to do was very simple. He just had to activate the power of the talent tree and absorb the power of the spirit vein. It would take some time, but this was his only way out at the moment. He wasn't in a hurry to activate the power of the talent tree. He flew out of the hole and checked the formation layout around him. After confirming that the concealment formation was working well, he wouldn't be exposed as long as he didn't deliberately come here to investigate. Only then did he fly back to the bottom of the hole and sit down cross-legged. He activated the power of the talent tree. In an instant, roots that were invisible to the naked eye extended and probed in all directions. As his cultivation base increased, the range that the talent tree's roots could extend had obviously increased. In other words, the efficiency of the talent tree's absorption had also increased. The roots pierced into the spirit vein. Following Lu Ye's actions, the talent tree's roots emitted an irresistible devouring power and absorbed the power of the spirit vein. As he immersed himself in observing, a faint gray mist floated up from the talent tree. This was clearly a sign that the talent tree was burning impurities. Although the power in the spirit vein was vigorous, it wasn't pure. This couldn't be compared to cultivating with the spirit sticks. Every time he used the spirit sticks to cultivate, the talent tree basically didn't have much of a reaction. This was enough to show the purity of the spiritual power absorbed. However, under this kind of absorption, the talent tree's burning could also ensure the purity of his spiritual power. He silently activated his mysterious art and guarded his mind. This method was undoubtedly extremely boring. But other than this, Lu Yi couldn't find a better way to escape. At the entrance, his clone was also sitting cross-legged, looking bored. Dao Shan stood beside him like a wooden stake, motionless. If it weren't for his light breathing, anyone would have thought that he was a dead person. Days passed by. The secret realm was peaceful. At a certain moment, the entrance to the secret realm opened and Yu Daiwei's figure flashed in. At a glance, she saw Lu Yi sitting there, seemingly cultivating. She couldn't help but frown. What the hell are you doing? These days she would come to the secret realm every 10 days to half a month, mainly to check if there was anything unusual with Lu Yi. Every time she came, Lu Yi would be sitting cross-legged at the entrance. She didn't think that Lu Yi had resigned himself to fate. After all, the Lord had said that Lu Yi definitely had a way to leave this secret realm. However, he could leave just by meditating. Yu Daiwei faintly felt that the Lord had misjudged him this time. The clone opened his eyes and glanced at Yu Daiwei, then continued to sit with his eyes closed as if he didn't see her. Yu Daiwei didn't get a response, but she didn't care. She turned to Dao Shi-san and said, "Look after him." Then she turned and left. She never stayed here mainly because the Lord wasn't here. There was no point for her to stay here. Moreover, she had many things to do, so she didn't have the time to stay here. If it weren't for investigating Lu Ye's situation, she wouldn't have come to this secret realm so easily. After she left, the main body breathed a sigh of relief. Although he had arranged a concealment array, and Yu Daiwei might not be able to find any clues even if she entered the secret realm to investigate, there was always a possibility. Fortunately, Yu Daiwei didn't expect that there would be someone in this world who could display such a miraculous clone technique that even a spirit sea cultivator like her couldn't see through. Since she saw Lu Yi sitting quietly at the entrance, there was no need to investigate further. In the pit more than 1,000 meters underground, Lu Yi continued to stimulate the power of his talent tree to devour the power of the spirit vein. It had been more than a month since he fell into this place. During such a long time, the talent tree had been constantly devouring and absorbing power, which was equivalent to him maintaining a state of cultivation. Lu Yi had never cultivated for such a long time before. So, even if the efficiency of his cultivation wasn't as high as Thieving Heaven's secrets, it still allowed him to break through a minor realm and reach the 6th order True Lake realm. However, the power of the spirit vein was still abundant. If he wanted it to reach that critical point, he didn't know how long it would take. During this time, Lu Yi had thought of a way to increase the efficiency of absorbing the power of the spirit vein. That was to condense another clone and have it help him devour the spirit vein. The clone had all the abilities of the main body, so it could naturally cultivate. Lu Yi had also tested this a few days ago, but the only problem was that the clone didn't have enough talent tree fuel, so once it began cultivating, it would find it difficult to maintain the purity of its own spirit chi because the clone couldn't burn off the minute impurities in its spirit chi. The main body was different. The main body had a lot of talent tree fuel stored in it. Not to mention anything else, just the 2 months of earth-lung fire he had devoured in the sword instrument sex sealed world was quite impressive. That was why Lu Yi could now devour the power of the spirit vein without any fear of affecting his foundation. But this wasn't a big problem. The clone would eventually be devoured by the main body, and at that time, the power in the clone's body would also be tempered and purified. As long as he could successfully condense another clone, the efficiency would increase exponentially. If he could condense 2 clones, the efficiency would double again. But after some attempts, Lu Yi didn't succeed. Chapter 1003. The mystery of the doppelganger lay in the talent tree root that remained in the doppelganger's body. It was this root that allowed the doppelganger to become lifelike, making it difficult to distinguish the real from the doppelganger. It also allowed the doppelganger and the main body to maintain a close connection no matter how far apart they were. The main body could stimulate the doppelganger and construct the twin lotus flowers on one stalk inside the doppelganger. But the talent tree could no longer extend its roots into the doppelganger. Lu Yi vaguely felt that this was related to the degree of conversion of the talent tree. The talent tree had been converted once, so it could split out a root but not a second one. If the talent tree was converted a few more times in the future, the number of doppelganger he could condense would definitely increase. This also made him realize the preciousness of his doppelganger. Before, he subconsciously felt that the doppelganger couldn't be destroyed at will. The loss of vitality, spiritual energy was secondary, If he lost the talent tree root in the doppelganger, it would be a huge loss. But now, it seemed that the loss of the doppelganger was much more serious than he had imagined. It was very likely that he would never be able to condense a new doppelganger. Time passed. After being trapped in the sealed world for more than 2 months, Lu Ye's cultivation had reached the 7th order True Lake realm. During this time, Yu Daiwei came again and still saw Lu Ye's doppelganger sitting cross-legged at the entrance with Dao 13 quietly guarding it. After that, she didn't come again. In her opinion, Lu Yi had already accepted his fate, and there was no way he could escape from the sealed world. Since that was the case, there was no need for her to waste time and pay less attention to him. Another half a month passed in a flash. On that day, as I was urging the talent tree to absorb the power of the spirit vein, I suddenly felt my body shake. There was a muffled sound of thunder coming from the depths of the ground, followed by a tremor. I hurriedly opened my eyes and spread out my divine sense, carefully probing the surroundings. Duoqing's face lit up with joy. After cultivating outside for 2.5 months and constantly absorbing the power of the spirit vein, I finally saw some results. The normalcy just now was the most obvious sign. At the entrance of the secret realm, Dao 18 also sensed that the secret realm was normal. Although he didn't look surprised, he knew exactly what was going on. If Yu Daiwei was outside and wanted to investigate, even if Wang Shan set up a small concealment array at the bottom of the pit, it might not be able to hide from your eyes. As the commotion died down, Dao 18 also calmed down and continued to stand outside like a wooden stake. My clone, who had been paying close attention to my movements, heaved a sigh of relief. I hadn't made up my mind just now. If Dao 18 didn't do anything strange, he would immediately do something to attract my attention. The plan was beginning to bear fruit, but it was still far from success. That's right, the power of the spirit veins in this secret realm was still very rich and abundant. If the spiritual energy wanted to completely devour the spirit veins outside, it wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. However, I didn't need to completely devour them. I just needed to let the spirit veins reach a critical point, a point where I could maintain the secret realm. The secret realm was like a house, and the spirit veins were the foundation of the house. The spiritual energy didn't need to completely destroy the foundation. As long as a part of it was damaged, the house would self-destruct. Over the next few days, the commotion in the secret realm became more and more frequent. Sometimes there would be no buzzing sounds coming from the depths of the ground. Every time this happened, the entire secret realm would shake. Even the clear sky of the secret realm started to show some strange phenomena. It was a sign that the secret realm was about to collapse. Dao 18 was affected and didn't seem to be in the right mood. After all, I was at the spirit sea realm and subconsciously felt safer. However, I had to follow Yu Daiwei's instructions and follow the spiritual energy with every step. I was in a dilemma. Even with Ling Guang's brain, I didn't know what to do. Every time my clone opened his eyes to look at me, he could see my calm expression. Sometimes he would let out a beast-like roar. Finally, at a certain moment, a huge buzzing sound could be heard. The wind and clouds in the secret realm changed. The sky suddenly cracked open like a broken mirror. Even the scenery in the secret realm stopped twisting and changing. The secret realm was about to collapse. After what happened in the Sword Tool Sect's secret realm, Wang Shan was very familiar with it. Once the secret realm collapsed, Dao 18 and I would leave the cage. What I had to do next was complicated. I had to retrieve my clone and get rid of Dao 18. At the same time, a door appeared at the exit of the secret realm. Because the secret realm was about to collapse, the closed door didn't show any signs of opening. Through the door I could vaguely see the scenery inside. Dao 18 looked at the door in surprise. He didn't understand why it was like this. My clone, who was sitting cross-legged next to me, suddenly opened his eyes. Dao 18 immediately looked at me. The clone smiled at me. Let's not meet again. As soon as he finished speaking, the Wang Shan around him activated and poured into the small formation on his body. I had already set up a teleportation formation on my body. I didn't set it up just yesterday. I didn't want Wang Shanai to see it when she retreated. There was no obstruction during the process. Dao 18 was only responsible for watching me. He followed Yu Daiwei's order and let me try to open the door. He didn't care if I was setting up a formation or not. Little formation friends, you on death? Inner hero second up. Doppelganger Shadow Dao 18 was stunned for a moment. Then he opened his mouth and roared. Visible waves of air shot out of his mouth and shot up to 100 feet. I quickly rushed to the spot where my clone had disappeared and dug a small hole with both hands. However, there was no trace of spiritual energy. Then, I used my divine will to search for Wang Shan's whereabouts. Still, I couldn't find anything. There was no formation to hide the spirit energy. The secret realm was in chaos. Wang Shan was agitated. Even a divine sea realm expert like Dao 18 wouldn't be able to find anything in a short time. About 100 feet away, my clone returned through the teleportation formation. Wang Shan pressed a hand under the clone and used the power of the talent tree to retrieve it. Just as he was done, the secret realm collapsed with a loud rumble. A large and small crack suddenly appeared in the sky. It was as deep as an abyss. Spirit energy rushed into the sky and rushed toward the crack. Luan state. As for how to get rid of Dao 18, I could only improvise. No matter what, it was weaker than being trapped in the secret realm. As soon as I appeared, Dao 18 didn't notice me. He roared and jumped up to chase after spirit energy. At this moment, the spiritual energy had already rushed out of the crack. However, my expression changed in the next moment. Because my expectation of returning to the four states was not realized. Instead, spirit energy felt like he had fallen into a bottomless abyss and was falling upward. That feeling. It wasn't like teleportation, and it was a long-distance teleportation. The whole process brought me a wonderful experience. While he was dizzy and disoriented, his spiritual power only felt that his mind was rising. In the dark, I seemed to be in an inexplicable void. In an ordinary environment, it was visible to the naked eye and could be perceived by the mind, but there was no strange scene. This was a huge plate in the shape of a gourd. It floated in the void. I didn't know where it came from and where it was going. It was like a lone boat sailing in the boundless ocean, and it seemed lonely and bleak. Spirit energy initially reacted to what it was, but soon he was shocked and lost consciousness. That huge plate in the shape of a gourd was a world. Was that the true appearance of the four states? I thought so in my heart. I wasn't surprised. The four states actually looked like that. What puzzled me even more was that I was just escaping when the famous secret realm collapsed. How could my mind be so low that I could see the full appearance of the four states? But soon I was shocked because I suddenly realized that it might be the four prefectures. I had never seen the map of the entire four states, but I didn't have the map of the war state. Comparing the two, I didn't see any unfamiliar traces from the huge plate behind my eyes. It was very unlikely that it was the four states, but it was definitely the world of the four states. What kind of place was it? Just as I was shocked, the huge plate in the shape of a gourd slowly shrank in my vision. My inexplicably low mind suddenly returned to my body. It was only then that I realized my situation. I was falling towards this gourd-shaped world at an extremely slow speed. There were meteorites falling from the sky beside me. I was mixed in with the falling meteorites and I didn't stand out at all. What made me feel even more regretful was that there wasn't a layer of inexplicable power protecting me. Although the speed of my fall was extremely slow, I didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Spirit Energy's eyes twitched and he didn't have any guesses in his heart. The situation in front of my eyes. It was most likely the work of the four states' heavenly secrets. The inexplicable power protecting me was the most obvious evidence. That power might have appeared out of thin air. I didn't activate Lu Yi myself. Apart from this mysterious and unfathomable heaven's will, who else could have been able to silently support me? Next time, with her experience with Lu Yi, Wang Shan naturally knew that there was only the four states in that world. So, this huge plate in the shape of a gourd must be another world that I knew about. But what made me understand was, why did heavenly secrets send me outside? There were no signs at all. I just wanted to escape from this famous secret realm. In the end, after leaving this famous secret realm and returning to the four states, I came to such a place and arrived there in such a way. It was simply inexplicable. But looking at everything that happened after, heavenly secrets would make mistakes. Since I was sent here, it was clear that heavenly secrets wanted me to do something outside. There was no road behind the mountain, so it was better to think less. Above me was a small land that was slowly approaching. Around it were pieces of fiercely burning meteorites. Seeing that I was less than 300 meters below the ground, I was about to use my spiritual energy to activate my Luyi to fly through the air. However, just as I was about to do so, I suddenly discovered that my Luyi had been imprisoned within my body. Great Sage of Human Tao. Chapter 1004. This time Luyi was scared out of his wits. At this moment he was falling from a height of 10,000 feet, like a meteorite falling from the sky. However, he was confident that he could fly, so he did not panic at all. However, if he could not even use his spiritual power, how could he fly? At such a high altitude, even if he had the foundation of a true lake stage cultivator, if he really fell to the ground, he would most likely die. The inexplicable power that shrouded his body had unknowingly disappeared. Luyi could clearly feel that the power had turned into a seal that entered his body, causing his spiritual energy to stagnate. He was getting closer and closer to the ground, and his speed was getting faster and faster. His ears were filled with the whistling of the wind. Many thoughts flashed through his mind as he tried to find a way out of this situation. One thing was for sure: the reason why he inexplicably came to such an unfamiliar place was the work of the 9 continents Tianji. It was very likely that Tianji sent him here to do something. Since that was the case, Tianji would not leave him with no way out. The inexplicable power that shrouded his body was like a protection, a barrier, a cover. What was Tianji hiding? There were also many meteorites that fell with him. This did not seem like a coincidence, but more like a trick to confuse him. At this moment of life and death, Lu Ye's mind was unprecedentedly clear, and he quickly came to an uncertain conclusion. Tianji sent him here but was afraid that someone would discover him, so he sent many meteorites to fall with him as a trick to confuse him, and sealed his power, probably because he was afraid that his aura would leak out. But if that was the case, then he would suffer. Turning his head to look around, Yang Kai found that the closest meteorite to him was a few hundred meters away. If he could reach that meteorite, he could borrow its momentum to slow down his fall, but in his current state he couldn't do so. As he got closer and closer to the ground, Lu Yi gritted his teeth and looked down, hoping to find a place with water. If that was the case, he might be able to survive. But as far as the eye could see, there was only a dense forest below, and there was no place to store water. He could only take it head-on. His body was strong, and if he was lucky, he might not die. Just as he was thinking about this, the sealing power in his body loosened slightly, and the frozen spiritual energy began to flow. Although it circulated very slowly, it was still a hope for survival. He hurriedly channeled his spirit energy, wanting to fly, but he was unable to do so. At this moment, his cultivation had been suppressed to the 3rd order spirit stream realm, so he couldn't fly at all. Seeing that he was only a few hundred feet away from the ground, Lu Yi hurriedly squeezed out the spirit energy in his body to construct the flying wing spirit tattoo on his back. With a crash, a pair of fiery red wings spread out. However, in the next instant, the wings collapsed and turned into specks of starlight. A 3rd order spirit stream realm cultivation wasn't enough to maintain the soaring wing spirit rune. But in that instant, Lu Ye's falling speed was greatly reduced. Almost at the same time as the wings dissipated, his body landed heavily on the ground. His entire body ached from the fall. Boom, 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 violent sounds came from all directions, wrapping up waves of heat waves. It was those meteorites that fell with him, smashing the earth, shaking the mountains and startling the birds. Lu Yi lay on the ground, bleeding from his mouth and nose, unable to get up. Sure enough, Heaven's secret had left him a way out, but being suppressed to the 3rd order spirit stream realm made him suffer a lot. With a thought, Lu Yi examined his body. His injuries weren't serious, and fortunately, he had reacted quickly at the last moment. Sensing that something was wrong, he had immediately constructed the soaring wing spirit tattoo. Otherwise, this trip would have boded ill. What made Lu Yi even more happy was that although his cultivation had been suppressed by that inexplicable force, he could still use his divine sense. This was more or less good news. After lying quietly on the ground for a moment, Lu Yi got up. This was not a place to stay for long. No matter why Heaven's Secret had sent him here or what he wanted him to do, it could be seen from Heaven's Secret's previous response that this was not a good place. Otherwise, there would be no need to go through so much trouble. When he, Wuji, and the others were sent to the Peerless Continent, they had been directly teleported there. There hadn't been so much trouble. This world must be extremely dangerous. The commotion caused by the meteorites falling should have attracted many creatures of this world to investigate. Lu Yi knew nothing about this world, so he naturally didn't dare to rashly expose himself. He randomly picked a direction and limped forward. He hadn't walked far when Lu Yi suddenly turned his head and looked in a certain direction with a puzzled expression. Using his divine sense, he vaguely sensed a vitality in that direction. This vitality gave him a very familiar feeling. After pondering for a moment, he walked in that direction. After a short while, they arrived at their destination. They saw a sturdy figure lying in a pit at first glance. Who else could it be but Dao Shi-san? This guy was also here. Lu Yi suddenly remembered that when he rushed into the crack in the sky in the nameless secret realm, he vaguely heard Dao Shi-san's angry roar. It seemed that Dao Shi-san had chased him here and was then dragged into this place. Lu Yi didn't know what he had encountered to make him unconscious here. However, judging from the pit below him, this guy had fallen directly, which was why he had created a pit in the ground. No wonder he had the physique of a divine sea realm cultivator. He hadn't died from the fall. Looking at the unconscious Dao Shi-san, Lu Yi was suddenly overjoyed. It was probably an accident that Dao Shi-san was dragged into this place. However, since Tianji had the means to send him here, he should have the means to exclude Dao Shi-san. However, Dao Shi-san still followed him here. In other words, Tianji had tacitly allowed this. From the looks of it, he wasn't alone. Jojo Tianji had sent over a helper. Under normal circumstances, Lu Yi couldn't do anything to Dao Shi-san. His cultivation was weaker than Dao Shi-san's, so what could he do? However, an unconscious Dao Shi-san was a different story. Lu Yi hurried forward and kicked Dao Shi-san. He wanted to make sure that Dao Shi-san was unconscious and also to take revenge for that punch. Dao Shi-san didn't move at all. After making sure that he wouldn't wake up easily, Lu Yi raised his hand and pointed at Dao Shi-san's forehead, activating the soul control rune. Right now, Dao Shi-san's soul defense was at its weakest. If Lu Yi could successfully control his soul, he would be able to enslave Dao Shi-san. In a completely unfamiliar world like this, a helper like Dao Shi-san would undoubtedly be of great help. Lu Ye's anticipation quickly turned into disappointment. He felt as if he had crashed into an iron wall again. Although it wasn't as serious as before, Lu Yi couldn't break through Dao Shi-san's soul defense at will even though he was unconscious. Lu Yi didn't dare to delay. He quickly took out a drop of soul water and drank it to replenish his soul power. He tried a second time. There was still no effect. Instead, Dao 13 let out a muffled groan, and a pained expression appeared on his face. Lu Yi felt that if this continued, Dao Shi-san would be awakened. Once he woke up, it would be difficult to enslave him with the soul control rune. If it weren't for the special circumstances, Dao Shi-san wouldn't have fallen unconscious so easily. Lu Yi made a decision. He took out the deity vanquishing sword from his storage space. When Lu Yi tried to enslave Dao Shi-san, he had thought of using the deity vanquishing sword. However, after careful consideration, he decided against it. If he used it, Dao Shi-san would definitely be angered. When that happened, Dao Shi-san would definitely beat him up. Now was the best time to use the deity vanquishing sword. Lu Yi activated his thin spiritual power and poured it into the deity vanquishing sword. Under normal circumstances, using this treasure would be a piece of cake. However, Lu Ye's cultivation was suppressed too much. He had to take it slow. Unfortunately, time was of the essence. After 30 breaths, Lu Yi felt that it was about time. He aimed the small sword at Dao Shi-san's head. The palm-sized deity vanquishing sword didn't even pierce Dao Shi-san's skin. However, a spiritual aura flashed from the sword and disappeared into Dao Shi-san's forehead. Even though he was unconscious, Dao Shi-san immediately revealed a pained expression. He suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like an angry bull. It was also at this moment that Lu Yi urged his spiritual force on him. Unlike the previous times, Lu Yi didn't feel any resistance this time. His spiritual will easily broke through Dao Shisan's soul defense and branded the soul control rune into his soul. Dao Shisan's expression became even more pained. He growled as if he wanted to resist, but he couldn't. After a while, Lu Yi retracted his spiritual will with a slightly pale face. He gasped for breath and looked at Dao Shisan in front of him. The soul control rune was successfully constructed. He could clearly feel that there was a mysterious connection between him and Dao Shisan. This connection was similar to the one between him and Hu Pa, but Lu Yi had more absolute control over it. Perhaps it was because his soul was torn apart by the deity vanquishing sword, but Dao Shisan shook his head vigorously. The light in his eyes became dimmer. His brain wasn't very bright to begin with, so he looked even more foolish now. Lu Yi took out another drop of soul water and dripped it into his mouth. The pained expression on Dao Shisan's face quickly eased. The dimness in his eyes also slowly dissipated. "Let's go," Lu Yi said. He turned around and ran in a certain direction. Dao Shisan got up from the ground and followed closely behind. While running, Lu Yi checked Dao Shisan's situation. He soon discovered that his cultivation was also suppressed because the spiritual energy fluctuations coming from Dao Shisan's body were similar to his. They were only at the 3rd or 4th order spirit stream realm. This made Lu Yi even more certain of his previous guess. The 9 provinces' heaven's secret seemed to be using this method to hide their existence from certain people in this world. Although his cultivation was suppressed to the spirit stream realm, Dao Shisan still had his spirit sea realm physique. What's more, he was an individual cultivator, so his physique was much stronger than Lu Ye's. So after running for a while, Lu Yi decisively climbed onto Dao Shisan's back and let him carry him forward. Dao Shisan ran as if he was flying. After running for a long time, they came to a city-like building. There was a long line of people lining up to enter. Every pedestrian was wearing a white mask, and every gatekeeper was also wearing a mask. They each held a small wooden stick in their hands. There was a small white object wrapped around the tip of the stick. The stick reached into the mouth of every pedestrian who was about to enter and stirred. Some people nodded and let them pass, while others were directly taken away. This operation confused Lu Yi, and he didn't know what to do if he wanted to enter. "May I ask why the guards are doing this?" Lu Yi asked the pedestrians around him. He had already gotten off Dao Shisan's back and told him to hide and wait for news. The pedestrian replied, "You're not a local, right? Recently, there's been a disease that can be spread by mouth. Those who suffer from this disease will feel depressed and their cultivation will not be smooth. Wearing this mask can effectively prevent others from infecting you." Chapter 1005. After a short while, figures flew over from all directions. Obviously, they were the native creatures who had come to investigate after seeing the commotion of the meteorite shower. To the cultivators of any world, this kind of meteorite that fell from the sky contained a large number of rare minerals that could be used to refine artifacts. Naturally, it would make people scramble for it. At this moment, Lu Yi had already traveled 100 kilometers with Dao 13 on his back. During this time, they encountered some native creatures flying over their heads. Fortunately, Lu Ye's divine sense was sharp and he was on guard, so he wasn't exposed. After running for several hundred miles, Lu Yi found a cave and entered it with Dao Shisan. His cultivation was suppressed too much, so he couldn't set up a spirit array. He could only be as vigilant as possible. He didn't know what kind of world this was, nor did he know what kind of creatures lived in this world. He also didn't know why the heavens had sent him here. As for how to return to the 9 states, he had no clue at all. Therefore, the most important thing right now was to collect information about this world. At the very least, he had to figure out whether the creatures in this world were from the human race or some other race. Restoring his cultivation was also a top priority, especially in such an unfamiliar environment. Lu Ye's 3rd order spirit stream realm cultivation couldn't give him any sense of security. Thinking of this, Lu Yi slowly came up with a plan. Sitting cross-legged at the bottom of the cave, Lu Yi tried to circulate his spirit qi to see if he could break through the inexplicable shackles. His cultivation had been suppressed, but it hadn't fallen, so as long as he could break through the shackles of this inexplicable power, he would be able to recover. But after some effort, Lu Yi had no choice but to give up because he found that the inexplicable power was too strong for him to shake. But to his relief, the power that was shackling his cultivation was dissipating at an extremely slow speed. This meant that even if he didn't do anything, his cultivation could still recover. As for how long this process would take, he couldn't be sure. Since he couldn't restore his cultivation for the time being and couldn't cultivate, Lu Yi couldn't leave this place rashly. For a while he felt bored. He looked up at Dao 13, who was standing to the side like a wooden stake, and said, "Sit down." Dao 13 had the soul manipulation divine rune planted in him, so he naturally obeyed and sat down obediently. "Who is your High Lord?" Lu Yi asked. Since he had nothing else to do, he decided to ask Dao 13 about the High Lord. Although he was currently trapped in this unknown world, sooner or later, he would be able to return to 9 regions. Judging from his brief contact with the High Lord before, this person had great ambitions, and his methods were miraculous. It was very likely that he would stir up a bloody storm in 9 regions at some point in time. If he could understand more about the High Lords, he would be able to deal with them when he returned to the 9 regions in the future. Dao 13 shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. Lu Yi frowned. "What's his name?" Dao 13 shook his head. Lu Yi continued to ask a few more questions. Dao 13 either remained silent or shook his head, which made Lu Yi feel helpless. He had long noticed that Dao Shisan wasn't very smart. Now he realized that even though he wasn't a fool, he wasn't far from being one. Dao Shisan is a Dao soldier. Dao Shisan suddenly said something strange. Dao soldiers? Lu Yi didn't understand. Yes. Dao 13 nodded. 2022-6-8 What was a Dao soldier? Although Lu Yi had never heard of it before, he vaguely sensed something. It was very likely that Dao 13 had been tempered by the High Lord using some mysterious method, so even though he had a strong cultivation, his intelligence was still muddled. "You're called Dao 13? Do you have Dao 12 or Dao 14? Dao 13 shook his head again. Lu Yi immediately lost interest in talking. Actually, it wasn't hard to pry information out of Dao 13. All Lu Yi needed to do was cast a little spiritual rune on Dao 13. Once this rune was cast, Lu Yi would be able to see through all the secrets in Dao 13's mind. But if he really did that, Lu Yi's secrets would also be exposed to Dao 13. So Lu Yi didn't want to use this method. Even if Dao 13's intelligence was muddled, Lu Yi still had to guard against him. Giving up on the idea of asking Dao 13 for information, the cave fell into silence. Master and servant sat facing each other in silence. Time flew by, and 3 days later, Lu Yi frowned. In these 3 days, his cultivation had recovered a little, but he was still in the 3rd order spirit stream realm. At this rate, he didn't know how long it would take for him to recover his original true lake realm cultivation. And with that inexplicable power shackling him, no matter how much he cultivated, it would be useless. He really couldn't understand why Heaven's secret would shackle his cultivation. What was it trying to hide? He originally planned to wait until his cultivation recovered before leaving this place to see what kind of world this was. It wouldn't work. He couldn't stay here for 10 or 20 years. Helpless, he could only leave the cave with Dao 13. Unfamiliar with this place, Lu Yi didn't know where to go, so he could only choose a direction at random. Master and servant walked forward. Along the way, they occasionally encountered some beasts, but they were all easily dealt with. Although their cultivation wasn't high, their divine senses were still intact, so these beasts naturally couldn't threaten them. Their luck was good. In less than half a day, the two walked out of the jungle and saw a village at the edge of the forest. There seemed to be a large population in the village. Because there were many houses, Lu Yi didn't rashly enter. Instead, he checked outside the village for a long time. Using his divine sense, he found that there were about 100 families in the village, and the population was close to 1,000. What made Lu Yi happy was that the people living here were humans, and not some strange race. After his previous experience in the sealed world, how could Lu Yi not know that in this vast universe, there was more than one nine-continents world, and more than one race, the human race? However, there were some things that made Lu Yi puzzled. Because this village didn't look like much, but every family seemed to be well off and had many children. The people here seemed to be very fertile. Every family had at least 2 or 3 children, and at most 6 or 7 children. Outside the village, there was a large spirit field, planted with something similar to spirit rice. Lu Yi casually picked some and put it in his mouth to taste. The spirit energy contained in the spirit rice wasn't very rich, but if eaten over a long period of time, it could at least prolong one's life. If that was the case, there should be many people with long lives in this world. However, there were no particularly old people in the village. There were very few people over the age of 40, and most of them were in their 20s or 30s. There were quite a number of cultivators in the village, more than 100 of them. Strangely, their cultivation wasn't high, and they were all at the spirit stream realm. However, they didn't look like cultivators. They seemed to be just ordinary farmers working in the fields like other ordinary people. Logically speaking, in such a well-established village, everyone should be at ease. However, in Lu Ye's observation, the people in the village, regardless of whether they were men or women, seemed to be in a constant state of anxiety, as if danger was about to come at any time. Even the children who didn't know much about the world rarely had the carefree smile that children should have. Lu Yi was puzzled by all these strange things. After observing for half a day, Lu Yi decided to enter the village. No matter what, he could only make contact with the native human race of this world. Too only then would he have the opportunity to gather information about this world. Otherwise, if he hid in the mountains with Dao San, he wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. Before appearing, Lu Yi put away the mountain plate saber and even stuffed his storage pouch into his robes. He led Dao San into the village. The people working in the fields saw them, but they only glanced at them a few times before ignoring them. This made Lu Yi even more confused. Logically speaking, if strangers came, they should be on guard. However, the people here didn't. They acted as if they didn't see them. On the other hand, the children who were playing at the entrance of the village saw him and Dao San and ran towards the depths of the village. Some of the older children ran and shouted, "Village head, there are refugees coming." Refugees. It seemed that this world wasn't as peaceful as he thought. There must be some unknown danger weighing down on these humans like a mountain, causing them to be so uneasy. Moreover, this kind of danger could come at any time. Lu Yi couldn't figure out what kind of danger it was. Perhaps it was because the children's shouts from before had alarmed the villagers. One after another, people pushed open the door to investigate, but they didn't go near. Until a middle-aged man in his 40s came forward. Lu Yi took a closer look and found that he was also a cultivator. However, he didn't use any spiritual energy, so Lu Yi couldn't determine his realm. The middle-aged man should be the village head. Although he was a cultivator, he was dressed like a farmer. Lu Yi was puzzled. In the 9 prefectures, anyone who could cultivate would not work in the fields. This was because every sect and clan would shelter a large number of mortals. The mortals could provide all the worldly items that the sect needed. However, in this unknown world, it seemed to be a common occurrence. The village head had a miserable expression. Lu Yi didn't know what he had encountered, but his eyes were red. It seemed that he hadn't rested well. He looked at Lu Yi from head to toe, then looked at Dao San behind him. Lu Yi nodded wordlessly. His brows were tightly knitted, and he looked like he had suffered a great deal. 2022-6-9 He didn't have the slightest understanding of this world, so he naturally adhered to the principle of speaking less and making fewer mistakes. If the village head mistakenly thought that he was a refugee, then he would just treat him as one. Since he was a refugee, it was normal for him to have an expression of grief and indignation. "Do you have a cultivation?" the village head asked again. Lu Yi nodded again and pushed his spiritual energy, revealing the pitiful fluctuations of a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator. The village head sighed, "You're lucky. Since you're here, stay. Well, whether it's a blessing or a curse, it depends on your own fate." Saying so, he beckoned to Lu Yi. Lu Yi followed along with Dao San. Not long after, under the guidance of the village head, The three of them arrived in front of a small courtyard. This is the village's inspection point. There are all kinds of professional masters here. Whether there's electricity or infectious diseases, you can tell with a single touch. Don't ask me why I'm not afraid of a foreigner like you. It's because I'm already sick. The village head's words were so shocking that Lu Yi hurriedly stepped aside. Are you polite? Chapter 1006. The village was filled with small courtyards. Every house was like this, and they weren't close to each other with some distance between them. As far as the living environment was concerned, it was undoubtedly very good. You will live here from now on. It's your first day here, so you two should rest first, the village chief ordered. Many thanks, village chief. Lu Yi thanked him. The village chief nodded and turned to leave. Lu Yi watched him leave before leading Dao Shan into the courtyard. He didn't expect to be assigned a place to live as soon as he arrived. But as soon as he stepped into the courtyard, Lu Yi frowned. The courtyard was in a mess, and there were a lot of bloodstains on the ground that hadn't dried yet. Obviously, someone had cleaned it up and settled it down. After a while, Lu Yi led Dao 13 out of the courtyard. He was going to talk to the village chief and see if he could get some information. But when he walked out of the courtyard, he found that the whole village was quiet. Even the children who were playing outside were gone. Every house was closed. Lu Yi looked up at the sky. The sun hadn't set yet. He was speechless for a moment. He didn't know what the villagers were hiding from. Walking forward, he came to a courtyard 1,000 meters away. He saw the village chief enter this courtyard before, so this should be the village chief's residence. The door of the small courtyard was closed. Lu Yi raised his hand and knocked on the door. There was a commotion in the house. There were faint screams of children, but their mouths were quickly covered. Then the village chief's trembling voice sounded. Who died here? And judging from the scattered bloodstains, it wasn't just one person who died here. There were at least 5 or 6 people. When the village chief assigned this small courtyard to Lu Yi, he was still wondering where the original owner of this courtyard had gone. Now he understood. The original owner of this courtyard must have met with an accident, and the whole family must have died. Looking at the extent of the dried bloodstains, it should have happened in the last 2 days. Lu Yi was even more puzzled. What kind of danger was hidden in this seemingly prosperous village? Or perhaps the villagers themselves were a danger? If that was the case, Lu Yi wouldn't be afraid. Although he and Dao 13's cultivation had been suppressed to the third-order spirit stream realm, their divine senses were still intact. Dao 13 also had a spirit sea realm physique, so even a true lake realm cultivator wouldn't be able to do anything to them. If the people of such a village really wanted to harm them, they were bound to hit an iron plate. Together with Dao Shan, they cleaned up the messy house. Chief, it's me, said Lu Yi. Who are you? The one who fled here today. As soon as Lu Ye's voice fell, a long exhalation came from the house. The village chief's voice also became much gentler. If there's anything, we can talk about it tomorrow. It's already late today, quickly go and rest. The sun had not set yet, so they were still resting. But since Dao Shan had said so, Lu Yi couldn't force him. He could only bring Dao Shan back the way they came. The village was still quiet like a ghost town. Walking on the empty road, the occasional sound of children crying could be heard, but the adults quickly covered their mouths, not daring to make a sound. Lu Yi frowned, increasingly unable to understand the ways of this world. The night passed in silence. The next day, when the sky was bright, the people of the village began to appear one after another. The figures of children playing around also appeared all over the village. Before Lu Yi could go find the village chief, he had already come looking for him. His eyes were still red, as if he hadn't rested well. He looked at Lu Yi with some displeasure. Don't run around at night. You're already an adult, how can you not know the rules? Lu Yi wanted to ask why, but if he did, it would expose his ignorance. He could only nod and say, I'll remember. I've troubled the village chief. Only then did the village chief's expression become slightly better. It doesn't matter. The wise masters who hurt you are from Cangnan village. You were from Tsangnan village before and after. What do you do in your village? Lu Yi asked tentatively. What can you do here? Plant spirit fields, go into the mountains to hunt. Although the ways of the world are like this, you still have to live, right? He looked as if the world was suffering, and life was difficult. Lu Yi immediately understood that the village chief had come to arrange work for him. Thinking about it, since he had come to Tsangnan village, he couldn't reap without sowing. 5-inch then go into the mountains to hunt? He had never done anything like planting spirit fields before. Hunting in the mountains was much easier. He had killed a few beasts on his way here with Dao San. The village chief nodded. You too have cultivation. Planting spirit fields is a waste of your talent. Today you'll go into the mountains with 5th Brother Zhang's team. He waved his hand. Come with me. They followed the village chief to the entrance of the village. White Inchlong Zhang Wu, whom Zhang Shui had mentioned before, and the leader of the group was none other than Zhang Wu. Brother Zhang. 5th Brother Zhang was a dark-skinned man. He didn't look very old, not even 30 years old. 5th Brother Zhang, these two will follow you from now on, said the village chief. 5th Brother Zhang didn't refuse. He nodded and said, Okay. It's getting late. Let's go. You must be back before the sun sets, said the village chief. The teams immediately spread out and entered the mountains from different directions. Lu Yi and Dao San were in 5th Brother Zhang's team. There were a dozen people in this team, all of whom were cultivators in Guangbai. However, all of them were at the 5th stage of the spirit stream realm, with the highest being 5th Brother Zhang. The others in the team were silent. Their expressions were dignified, as if hunting in the mountains was a dangerous task. Only 5th Brother Zhang, who was the team leader, took care of the newcomer Lu Yi and said a few words to him. It's the 100 gathering day in the village. In 5 days, gather at the entrance of the village as usual. Understood. Lu Yi nodded. There were still many beasts in the mountains. Occasionally there would be some weak monster beasts. The team's hunt went smoothly. By the afternoon they returned with a full load. During this time Lu Yi secretly warned Dao San not to be too eye-catching. After all, he was only at the 3rd stage of the spirit stream realm. If he suddenly burst out with the strength of a spirit sea realm cultivator, it would be too shocking. Before the sunset, everyone returned with big and small. Bai Wu returned to the village. The village chief was waiting at the entrance. When he saw the return of the team, he finally showed a smile, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The other teams also returned one after another. Soon, the entrance of the village was filled with all kinds of beasts. The village chief made the decision to distribute the meat. Lu Yi and Dao San also received more than 20 kilograms of meat. They carried the meat back to their residence. Dao San directly set up a bonfire in the courtyard to roast the meat. Lu Yi lay in a wooden armchair nearby, lost in thought. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Lu Yi looked up and saw the village chief carrying a bag in his hand. Lu Yi only needed to scan it with his divine sense to know that it contained the spirit rice grown in the village. It seemed that the two of them had worked hard today, so they had a harvest. The village chief handed the spirit rice to Lu Yi and left. The sun was about to set again. Every time this happened, the lively village would become empty. Lu Yi turned to look and saw Dao 13 staring at the barbecued meat without blinking. He walked forward, took a piece of roasted beast meat, and ate it in big bites. Dao San looked on helplessly. If it was before, he would have punched Lu Yi. However, now that Lu Yi had planted the soul manipulation divine rune, he did not dare to be rash. He had no choice but to roast the rest of the meat on the bonfire. Lu Yi leisurely ate the meat. He had to admit that although Dao San was stupid, he was quite good at roasting meat. It tasted delicious. As he was eating, his expression suddenly changed. He sat up straight and sensed his own body. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he clearly felt that the restrictive force in his body was dissipating faster. Then he watched as Lu Yi grabbed the meat that wasn't fully cooked and began to gorge himself on it. Lu Yi finished it in just a short while. Looking at the empty roasting rack, Dao San frowned. He did not know what had gone wrong. Lu Yi, on the other hand, was overjoyed because he realized that it was as he thought. Eating meat could accelerate the dissipation of the restrictive force. He immediately took out a large amount of meat from his storage bag. Because he was raising Hupa, in addition to his own desire for good food, he always kept a lot of beast meat in his storage pouch all year round. The quality of the meat was undoubtedly much better than the meat he hunted during the day. Since eating meat could accelerate the dissipation of the restrictive force, things were much easier. Seeing Lu Yi take out so much meat, Dao Shisan's frown immediately relaxed. He helped Lu Yi and roasted the meat on the bonfire. The restrictive force from the 9 provinces' Heaven's Secret would slowly dissipate on its own. However, it was very slow. Lu Yi did not know how long it would take for him to recover his cultivation base. For the past 2 days, he had been thinking about how to dissolve the restrictive force, but he had no idea. Until now. He hurriedly finished the rest of the beast meat in his hand and activated the gluttonous meal. Immediately, a buzzing sound came from his stomach. Under his perception, his stomach seemed to have turned into a millstone, grinding the beast meat that he ate. The power of imprisonment dissipated a little faster, however. It quickly returned to normal. The essence of the meat had been used up. Eating meat could accelerate the dissipation of the restrictive force? Lu Yi did not know why, but based on his current experience it seemed to be the case. He turned his head and looked at the other piece of meat roasting on the bonfire. Dao Shisan's body tensed up. He looked up and met Lu Yi's gaze. He had a bad feeling. Seeing Lu Yi take out so much meat, Dao Shisan's frown immediately relaxed. He helped Lu Yi and roasted the meat on the bonfire. A moment later, the master and servant both ate until their mouths were covered in oil. However, Lu Yi's brows furrowed. This time the restrictive force in his body did not react at all. When he ate the meat just now, the restrictive force dissipated faster. Why was there no reaction this time? He did not believe it and ate a few more pieces, but there was still no reaction. He did not understand. Chapter 1007. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi had some guesses. However, he still needed to verify whether it was what he thought it was. He turned his head to look. Dao Shisan immediately turned around and used his body to block the barbecued meat in his hand. He was afraid that Lu Yi would snatch it away again. How could Lu Yi snatch it away from him? He got up and walked to the side. He took the bag of spirit rice that the village chief had given him, opened it, and stuffed a handful of spirit rice into his mouth. Although the spirit rice was hard to swallow without cooking, it was not a problem for Lu Yi. He casually chewed a few times and swallowed it. At the same time, he urged the gluttonous meal to speed up his digestion and calmly sensed it. The inexplicable power that sealed his cultivation was dissipating at a faster speed. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. It was as he thought. It was not that eating meat could speed up the dissipation of the sealing power. It was that he had to eat something native to this world, not meat or spirit rice. As for why this was the case, Lu Yi was not too sure. He subconsciously felt that there might be some special power hidden in the food of this world that could dissolve the sealing power. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was not very likely. No matter whether it was the meat or spirit rice he ate, there was nothing special about it. If there was a special power hidden in it, he would definitely be able to detect it. What's more, that mysterious sealing power was something that Tianji had left on his body, and Tianji had done this to hide who had discovered him. Since that was the case, why would eating something produced in this world be able to speed up the melting of the sealing power? Lu Yi ate the spirit rice and pondered deeply. Tianji of the 9 prefectures was guarding against someone. Who in this world was worthy of Tianji of the 9 prefectures' vigilance? Even the method of sending him here was under the cover of the meteor shower. Tianji of the 9 prefectures sealed 99% of his cultivation, almost reducing him to the level of an ordinary person. Suddenly, Lu Yi thought of a possibility. Tianji of the 9 prefectures might not be guarding against someone but the entire world. The world had its own will. Although no one had ever told Lu Yi anything, Lu Yi had always felt that the mysterious and omnipresent Tianji was the will of the 9 prefectures' world. That was why he had so many mysteries. The soaring dragon realm that he had been to before also had a will. It had turned into Yi Liuli and accompanied him by his side. In the end, it had gifted him the broken source of the soaring dragon realm. Since that was the case, it was very likely that this unknown world had also given birth to a will. As an outsider, he was sent to this world by the 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets. This was tantamount to an invasion. It was very easy for the will of this world to detect him. That was why the 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets sealed his cultivation, and even used the meteor shower as a cover to let him come to this world. By eating the beast meat and spiritual rice of this world, it was equivalent to imprinting the information of this world into his body, assimilating his existence with this world. In this way, the will of this world would have a hard time detecting the existence of an intruder. That was why the power of imprisonment was dissipating so quickly. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that his guess was right. Many of his doubts were easily resolved. Take the method of ascending to this world as an example. When he, Ing Wuji, and the others went to the broken Wushuang continent together, Zhuzhou Qianji directly teleported them over. There were no twists and turns at all as they appeared all over the Wushuang continent. But this time they used the meteor shower as a cover. Because this was the only way to deceive the will of this world. If that was the case, then the will of this world was definitely not as good as the 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets. Otherwise, it would have already detected him, and would not have been deceived by the 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets. It was very likely that the will of this world was in a hazy state. It was not as complete as the 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets. If he was compared to the 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets, then Tao 13's intelligence was comparable to the will of this world. A large piece of half-eaten beast meat was suddenly placed in front of Lu Yi. Only then did Lu Yi recover from his thoughts. He looked up and saw Tao 13's reluctant expression. However, he resolutely handed over his beast meat. It was probably because he could not bear to see Lu Yi eating the spiritual rice. Lu Yi laughed and patted him on the shoulder. "Come with me. I will take you to find something good to eat." Since eating the food of this world could speed up the dissipation of the power of imprisonment, it was too simple. There were many beasts and monster beasts in this mountain. He and Tao 13 had killed some of them before, but they did not eat them. That was why they had only discovered this mystery today. The whole village was quiet. Everyone had closed their doors and windows. Lu Yi and Tao 13's departure did not alarm anyone. Deep into the mountain, the master and servant duo soon had a full harvest. They found a place to start a fire and simply roasted the meat. Lu Yi had always had a big appetite. With the help of the gluttonous meal, he could naturally digest as much as he ate. Tao 13 was even better. After all, he had the physique of a spirit sea realm cultivator. Holly when the food came much faster than Lu Yi. Therefore, in less than an hour, the two of them had eaten all the food they had collected in the middle of the night. The power of imprisonment in his body dissipated a little. Lu Ye's cultivation returned to the 4th order spirit stream realm. The same was true for Tao 13. Lu Yi did not continue and led Tao 13 back to the village. During the day, a hunting team like theirs did not need to work in the fields. They only needed to go into the mountain every 5 days to hunt some beasts and bring them back. This saved Lu Yi a lot of trouble. Every day, he would chat with someone during the day and inquire about information about this world. At night, he would lead Tao 13 into the mountain to hunt. Relatively speaking, gathering information did not go very well. Lu Yi did not even know what this world was called, and the villagers had never left the village since they were born. He only knew that there was not only the human race in this world, but also another race that the villagers called the holy race. As for what kind of race the holy race was, Lu Yi did not know, and neither did the villagers. What made his heart heavy was that the holy race seemed to have an inviolable position in the hearts of the villagers. Every time Lu Yi wanted to inquire more about the holy race, the villagers would avoid him, making him feel helpless. On the 5th night after arriving at the village, Lu Yi still led Tao 13 to hunt in the mountains. Over the past few days, the two of them had recovered their cultivations to the 6th order spirit stream realm. Although this was nothing compared to their original cultivation, it was still a good start. Moreover, Lu Yi also noticed that eating the flesh and blood of demon beasts was much more effective than eating the flesh and blood of beasts. Perhaps it was because there was more essence in the flesh of monster beasts. Lu Yi had been searching for powerful monster beasts these past few days, but unfortunately, he had not gained anything. At this time it was already the second half of the night. Lu Yi led Dao 13 back to the village before dawn, otherwise if they were seen by the villagers, the village chief would definitely reprimand them for not following the rules. After leaving the mountain forest and seeing the village from a distance, Lu Ye's footsteps paused because a blood-red light flashed from the direction of the village. From this blood-red light there was a faint scream. The scream sounded familiar, and the image of a woman immediately appeared in Lu Ye's mind. After a few days of getting along, Lu Yi and the villagers of Congnan village had become familiar with each other, and he knew many of them. He had exchanged a few words with this woman. She was about 20 years old and had a third-order spirit stream realm cultivation. She was a member of the hunting team. The scream came from this woman, but the blood-red light definitely did not belong to her, because the spirit energy fluctuations emanating from the blood-red light were at the Cloud River realm. There were no Cloud River realm cultivators in Congnan village. Lu Yi did not know who she had encountered and was actually kidnapped, but at this time he obviously could not just sit back and watch. However, just as he was about to save her, her screams came to an abrupt end. Perhaps Lu Ye's movements had alerted the owner of the blood-red light. After glancing over, the figure in the blood-red light flew straight over. After a short while, it landed in front of Lu Yi. The blood-red light dissipated, revealing a figure. The person who came was wearing a long robe. He was tall and slender, at least a head taller than Lu Yi. His exposed skin was blood-red like a cooked lobster, and he had a pair of pointed ears. His 10 fingernails were sharp and gleaming with a cold light. The woman Lu Yi knew was held in his hand like a rag sack. She was no longer breathing, and there were 2 bloody holes on her white and slender neck, but no blood was flowing out. Even her whole body had become extremely pale, as if all the blood in her body had been drained. Lu Yi quietly looked at the strange figure in front of him, his eyes drooping slightly. He finally understood what the villagers meant by the holy race. Blood race. He had seen many blood race in the soaring dragon realm, and had even killed many with his own hands. How could he be unfamiliar with the blood race? It could even be said that when he entered the mirage realm with the help of the breath fruit core, there were many blood race figures rushing out of the mist. The destruction of the soaring dragon realm was directly related to the blood race. It was the absorption of the blood world and the invasion of the blood race that led to the destruction of the soaring dragon realm. He entered the soaring dragon realm to train, and brought another possible future to the soaring dragon realm with his own strength. Although this future could not be realized, he still received the final gift of the soaring dragon realm's origin. So, this was the blood world. Where did this blood food come from? The strange blood race member sized up Lu Yi and Dao San, and his eyes lit up. The quality is not bad. As he spoke, he casually threw the woman's body aside and reached out to grab Dao San. For the blood race, people with rich blood like Dao San were undoubtedly more attractive, so he directly attacked Dao San. However, this time he kicked an iron plate. He grabbed Dao San's shoulder with one hand, but his sharp nails did not break Dao San's body. After all, this was the body of a divine ocean realm cultivator. How could a blood race member of the Cloud River realm break it? The strange blood race member's expression changed. Dao San turned to look at Lu Yi. "Take him down," Lu Yi said in a low voice. Dao San grabbed the blood race member's shoulder with one hand, and the latter struggled with all his might. However, it was useless. At the same time, he was shocked that such a lowly person had such brute strength. After a series of punches and kicks, the blood race member was tied up and hung on a tree branch. "Are you a King blood race member? You suck other people's blood every day. Not a single drop of your blood is your own, right? Look at how arrogant you are. I dare you to be so arrogant." The blood race member's defense was obviously broken by his taunting. "Damned ant, let me go or you'll all die." He roared and cursed wildly, trying to scare Lu Yi into letting him go. Dao San beat him up. If I don't beat the sh*t out of you, then I'll consider it your fault. Chapter 1008. As soon as Lu Yi finished speaking, Dao Shan made his move. He grabbed the stranger's wrist and twisted the stranger's arm into the shape of a fried dough twist. The stranger screamed in agony as his spiritual energy surged wildly. Thick blood surged out of his body, trying to break free from Dao 13's grip. Although Dao 13's cultivation level was unimpressive, he still had a divine ocean realm physique. How could the stranger break free? Anger and shock appeared on his face as he shouted, "How dare you, blood food! Let go of me!" He had never experienced such an unbelievable thing before. Not only was a mere blood food not afraid of him, but he even dared to attack him. The stranger's struggles annoyed Dao 13, so he pulled the stranger in front of him and head-butt him. With a boom, Dao 13 was unscathed, but the unfamiliar Blood Clan member felt the world spin around him, and he saw stars. He finally realized that something was wrong. The two blood food in front of him were not the kind that would obey his orders. Instead, they had a rebellious heart. The bloody light around his body became even more intense. Suddenly, he turned into a pool of blood. Dao 13 had never seen such a strange secret technique before. His grip loosened, and the stranger broke free from his grip. The crimson light turned and attempted to flee into the distance. However, Lu Yi was prepared. With a surge of his divine sense, he turned it into an invisible force that rushed toward the bloody light. As the stranger screamed, the bloody light twisted, revealing the stranger's figure. Dao 13 saw this and also used his divine sense to attack. The stranger immediately fell to the ground, his body twitching. He was only a Cloud River realm cultivator. How could he resist the divine sense attacks of Lu Yi and Dao 13? His mind was in a daze, and even if he recovered, he would still be a fool. Lu Yi stepped forward and touched the stranger's forehead. After a moment of hesitation, he used a bit of his divine sense on him. If he wanted to gather information about this world, it was best to start with the stranger. This was the first time Lu Yi used a bit of his divine sense. He was very careful because this divine pattern was related to the divine sense. Lu Yi's divine sense surged, easily breaking through the unfamiliar blood race's divine soul defense. The moment the divine pattern was completed, Lu Yi frowned. Strange images that he had never seen before appeared in his mind, and a large amount of information flooded into his mind like a tidal wave. That kind of feeling was very strange and uncomfortable. Lu Yi was suffering, but so was the strange vampire. The vampire, who had almost fallen into a coma, suddenly opened his eyes wide and trembled violently. His eyes were full of shock and disbelief. Obviously, he had discovered some of Lu Yi's secrets. After a long while, Lu Yi withdrew his finger and retreated to the side. His face was visibly pale and his forehead was covered in sweat. Many unfamiliar images and information mixed together in his mind, attacking his mind. Lu Yi quickly took out a drop of soul-cleansing water and swallowed it. Only then did he feel a little better. He silently decided that in the future, unless he had no other choice, he would definitely not use his spiritual perception. Although this divine imprint was miraculous, it was a type of torture to both him and others. Perhaps in the future, when his soul became stronger, it would be better, but for now the experience of stimulating his soul was definitely not good. Fortunately, he had obtained a lot of information about this world. Keep an eye on him, instructed Lu Yi. 13 sat down cross-legged and silently digested the information he had just obtained. It was different from what he had imagined. This shouldn't be the blood realm that had once destroyed the soaring dragon realm, but a realm called the blood refining realm. This realm was as vast as the 9 provinces, and it was ruled by the blood race. There were also many humans living here, but they were nothing more than food for the vampires, just like livestock. In the blood refining realm, the blood race's status was supreme. They could take from humans and kill them as they pleased. Countless years of deeply ingrained beliefs made it so that most humans didn't have the heart to resist the blood race. In fact, most people didn't even know what the blood race was. They only knew of the sacred race. Take the nearby village, for example. From the village chief to the naughty children, No one had ever seen a blood race before. Everyone who had seen a blood race had died. Now many things that Lu Yi had been puzzled about became clear. Previously Lu Yi was very puzzled. The people in the village seemed to have no worries about food and clothing, but why were they so worried all day and closed their doors every night? Only now did he know that death could come at any time. In such an oppressive atmosphere, how could the villagers be at ease? They closed their doors at night and instinctively guarded against the blood race, but what was the use? When the blood race came to the village, they could catch whoever they wanted. The thin doors couldn't stop the blood race's invasion at all. The village's population wasn't small because the blood race had raised humans like livestock. Since they were livestock, they naturally had to encourage reproduction, so every family tried to raise as many children as possible. The blood race even allowed humans to cultivate. To the blood race, the blood of some cultivators was much more useful than the blood of ordinary people. However, the blood race didn't allow humans to have two strong cultivators, so any cultivator in the village whose cultivation exceeded a certain level would disappear without a trace at a certain time. This was also the reason why there weren't any humans who were too old or too strong in the village. Once they were old, they would be useless to the blood race and could only be used as food. In the blood refinement realm, humans lived like pigs and dogs. In fact, they were even worse than pigs and dogs. This was because, under the blood race's rule, humans couldn't live past the age of 40. People like the village chief could be considered to have a long lifespan among humans. After sorting out the complicated information in his mind, Lu Yi slowly stood up and walked to the blood race's side. After being attacked by Lu Ye's and Dao Shisan's spiritual sense, the blood race had fallen into a coma. Lu Yi took out the mountain blade, aimed it at the blood race's chest and stabbed it. The unconscious blood race suddenly opened his eyes and straightened his body. He looked at Lu Ye's eyes in shock and anger. Lu Ye's eyes were cold and sharp. He turned his blade and dug out a blood-red ball the size of a longan from the blood race's chest. The ball was dark red as if it was made of fresh blood. At a glance it looked like a kind of crystal that was extremely sturdy. This was the blood race's heart and the condensation of their cultivation. It was similar to the demon core of a demon beast. The blood race called it the blood crystal. This was the first time Lu Yi knew about the blood crystal. When he was killing the blood race in the soaring dragon realm, he didn't care about such details. This time, if he hadn't used the mountain-piercing spiritual sense to obtain a lot of information, he might not have noticed it. When the blood crystal was taken out, the blood race's neck immediately tilted and he stopped breathing. Lu Yi held the blood crystal in his hand and studied it for a moment. To eat it or not to eat it, that was the question. If he wanted to dissolve the restraining power in his body and recover his original cultivation, he had to do his best to imprint as much information about this world into his body so that he could assimilate with this world. The specific method was to eat the things in this world. He had been doing this for the past few days, but his progress wasn't fast. Based on his current progress, it would take him at least 2 months to fully recover his cultivation. Dao Shisan would take even longer because his cultivation was higher. The main reason was that he couldn't hunt valuable demon beasts. Most of the demon beasts he and Dao Shisan hunted were ordinary beasts. In comparison, the blood crystal in his hand was undoubtedly more valuable. If he could really refine the energy in the blood crystal, Lu Yi felt that he would be able to dissolve a lot of the restraining force in his body. It was very likely that he would be able to recover part of his strength. The blood race wasn't human, but they were still somewhat similar to the human race. This thing was taken out from the blood race's body. On second thought, the blood race treated humans like livestock. What was the point of eating a blood crystal? It wasn't like he hadn't eaten a demon beast's demon core before. He should just treat it as a demon beast's demon core. This wasn't the land of the 9 states. No matter what, the most important thing was to recover his cultivation as soon as possible. With that thought, Lu Yi didn't hesitate anymore. He took out some water and washed the blood crystal clean. Then, under Dao Shisan's stunned gaze, he stuffed it into his mouth. It was crunchy and crunchy. There wasn't any special texture. There wasn't even much of a bloody taste. It wasn't bad. As he was eating, he suddenly heard the sound of something piercing through the air. Lu Yi looked up quietly and saw a blood-red light flying toward the village. Clearly, another blood race member was going to the village to catch blood food. Lu Yi channeled a bit of his spiritual energy. Sure enough, it attracted the blood race member's attention. The blood-red light changed direction and flew toward him. Soon, it landed in front of him and revealed itself. Like the previous blood race member, this blood race member was tall and slender. His skin was red and he had 2 pointy ears. The blood race members were generally taller than humans. When Lu Yi looked at his face, a scene immediately appeared in his mind. This scene came from the dead blood race member on the ground, because just half an hour ago these two blood race members were still fighting. In the land of the 9 states, the human race was divided into 2 camps. They fought each other endlessly. In this blood-refining world, the blood race members weren't united. In fact, their fights were even fiercer and more chaotic. This was all because of the blood crystal. After a member of the blood clan killed another member of the blood clan, they could take the blood crystal of the other member of the blood clan to increase their own cultivation. This was somewhat similar to the demonic beasts. The demonic beasts could increase their own cultivation by devouring the demonic cores of other demonic beasts. Because of this, the blood race members grew much faster than humans. This was because they could consume each other's blood crystals to increase their growth. Moreover, there weren't many hidden dangers. This was an advantage that humans didn't have. It was also the fundamental reason why the blood race ruled this world. Half an hour ago, 2 blood race members fought. The weaker one fled pathetically and came to the village to catch blood food to replenish his strength. In the end, he was killed by Lu Yi and Dao San. Half an hour later, the other blood race member tracked him down. He probably wanted to enter the village to have a good meal, but he was lured here by Lu Yi. The blood race member landed and saw his fellow blood race member lying on the ground. He then looked at Lu Yi and Dao San. He didn't understand the situation and asked, "How did he die?" "I'm not Dao San. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.